the knight was fighting a monster. He threw it away, but the hero was able to stay on his feet. The knight shouted loudly that this was the end for the demon lord. He took out his sword and ran at the monster that had used magic. There is a special gift. Unlike the demi-humans who inherited the blood of demons and received excellent characteristics, this is a blessed gift from God to insignificant people who have nothing. The gift is given to people at the age of 12, allowing them to gain various abilities. There are many blessed ones, for example, a swordsman who can slay 1,000 warriors, or a brilliant general tactician, great wizards who can turn the tide of war. Despite this, they once overpowered and suppressed the demi-humans. It so happened that the protagonist of this story became a hero because the gift descended on him. People gathered in the castle. If you walk through the large corridors, you can get to the throne room in which a guy was kneeling. The king joyfully told him that he had done well to return. He called the guy the hero, Garius. The king said with a smile that he saw that he had achieved great success in fighting demons. He asked Isabel, his wife, what was wrong. The girl replied with a smile that yes, he had heard that he had shown great valor. The king jumped down from his throne and shouted joyfully that he had performed well in the duel with the demon lord. His achievements have provided people with peace. He thought he was the guy he imagined him to be. Garius replied that he was grateful for his words. The king ran up to his son, Jared, and sweetly asked if he agreed with him. The guy proudly replied that there really was nothing wrong with his judgment. Garius looked around. He thought it was weird. Although the hero somehow managed to return, only General Gott is here, it's unusual. Because of the war, they are sending people to rebuild cities that have suffered damage. The king sat on the throne and wearily said that the time had finally come for people. The long battle was finally over. He is grateful to him. Now he can sit on the throne with a calm soul. The king stared at the guy and said loudly that in this regard, he had one request for him. Garius asked with interest what it could be. The king said that he could give his son, Jared, all the credit for his achievements, including defeating the demon lord. The guy looked at him in shock and asked what he wanted. The king awkwardly said that during the expedition, Jared was not noticed, so it would not arouse suspicion. The guy smiled and proudly straightened his hair. The ruler said that the hero is the one that the citizens love. That's why the appearance of the pet of everyone is necessary. People should be happy with his behavior. The king turned away and confusedly said that it was a little difficult. He asked to explain what to do. Isabel covered her mouth with a fan and said that she thought it would be better if he directly told the hero his goals. The king shouted joyfully that yes, that's right, he would tell everything. The king said loudly that the fact was that Garius was too ugly to be called a hero. The guy thought wearily that this was the case, the same thing again. As a child, they shouted that he was an orc child. Two boys surrounded little Garius and started throwing stones at him. They laughed and shouted loudly that he was an orc child. He just needs to be killed. They hit Garius's head and ran away screaming that the orc child would be angry. The boy wiped his face and headed for the village. It was obvious that they often laughed at him like that. He saw a woman telling the boys to behave themselves. She told the boys that if they rubbed up against this vile monster, then they would look like friends of a demon. The children replied with smiles that it was fine. Garius burst into tears and went home. He went up to his mother, who screamed loudly at him not to come near her. Because of him, she was shunned. They think she had a love affair with a demon. He is a child of misfortune. The boy thought that it was the 12th day he had experienced. The adult Garius thought that he hoped that if he tried his best, and if he used the gift that he was gifted from God, then he would be recognized. Jared said with a smile that it was just because his appearance did not fit the character, on the other hand. His appearance was excellent. Jared added that he also has a blessing called charisma. Garius thought that the prince has a blessing that attracts people called charisma. He just attracts friends. Garius looked at the prince and thought wearily that as long as there was a gift, even a prince like him could be a hero. He arrives in shock from everything he has heard. The king said that, of course, they would not ignore his achievements. The ruler asked Gotti to give the reward. The man approached Garius and handed over the bag. The guy opened the bag and saw a large number of gold coins. The king shouted joyfully that he must be tired of fighting. he should live quietly in the suburbs. Disappointed, Garius thought that he was being told to live in his suburbs and keep his mouth shut. He was fighting for the good of the people, and they just gave him money and told him to leave. Garius got up from his knees and said that he understood. The king said he was asking for forgiveness, but it was necessary. That's how Garius lost his hero status, and a prince will be in his place. The guy went out with his bag. Suddenly, someone called him, and he turned his head. Garius said in surprise that it was General Goot. What was it? They went down the corridors together. Garius asked the general what he knew about it. The man replied that more or less, but it was one thing over which he had no power. Gote said that he was really upset, but it depends on his point of view. Garius replied that he understood. Gote looked at the guy and said that, however, God had given him a cruel blessing, which made him, a guy from a poor farming village, a hero. The blessing of the master of objects is the power that made him a master of any weapon. Garius thought he was a hero, but without the appropriate weapon, he was someone who couldn't even compare to a soldier. It's understandable when people look down on you. Gote said with a smile, well, it's fine to step back from the battlefield a little and live peacefully. The man laughed loudly and shouted that he must want to think about his future at the hotel he had booked for him. Besides, tomorrow is the day when the hero will be announced to the public as a stand. Gulte stopped and angrily asked Garius what he must want to see. The prince is clowning for the last time. Garius walked by saying it didn't matter anymore. Gulte looked after him. Isabel leaned over to the man and said with a smile that everything seemed to be going well. She was very pleased with it. Go said that it was because Garius destroyed the demon lord faster than he thought, which is amazing. The girl put on a shirt and asked if everything was okay, however. She is very interested in whether this terrible creature will appear at the hero's return tomorrow. Maybe he will not come. Got confidently replied that she had nothing to worry about. Isabel asked with a smile that he was not going to force the scarecrow to do this, namely to kill the fake hero. Isabel put a glass on the table and Gotu replied with a smile that it would be just a sacrifice. There is no guarantee that his blade will not be aimed at them. He will train an assassin on the side. The girl said she thought it was true. Got looked at the girl and said that he meant that he was the hero who defeated the demon lord. In any case, he wouldn't put her in danger. Isabel replied that she was so happy that he was taking care of her safety. He looked at the painting depicting Isabel and the king and said that in fact, without her, he would not be able to become king. She was very important and valuable to him. Isabel said that she would maintain her beauty until she died, as long as her blessing allows. A replacement is possible even if the prince dies. God said, however, to risk the position of the queen in order to seize power in the kingdom. The girl replied that she had already said it before. You don't have to worry. Isabel threw a glass at the painting and said that the fat, unsightly king was not her equal. The prince, who calls himself a hero, will fall from the assassin's blade, and later the king will die an unhappy death. She said that the tragic queen chooses the strongest knight as her new husband and restores the kingdom. They cannot make any mistake in this regard. God said with a smile that his blessing specializes in battles. He will probably be the most decorative king in her use. Isabel replied that he was very reliable. The man cunningly thought that, however, he thought angrily that she was just a stupid woman who cared only about her appearance. She will become useless when you get tired of her hugs. It's very funny. Isabel looked away and smiled. She happily thought that she would send this stupid man to the battlefield and live happily surrounded by beautiful men. They simultaneously thought that they would get rid of each other when one of them was no longer valuable. People gathered in the square to greet the hero. Disappointed, Garius thought that he was in a bad way. He had accidentally come here while running around the capital in preparation for his journey, and now he was stuck in the crowd. People began to cheerfully shout that they could see the return of the hero. They want to see him soon. He must have a beautiful figure. Garius listened to all the gossip. Darius thought that yes, today was the ceremony. He thinks he should wait until this farce is over before he can leave and better hurry up. His nose caught a whiff of something. He thought that this smell was a colorless balm. It's used by demons to sabotage human attempts at something. But why here? Once he gets the information, by following the scent, he can turn the tables on them. Garius noticed a strange man in the crowd. He thought it was him or her, he's not sure. This is obviously for someone's personal purposes. He smelled a strange smell again. The guy tried to walk through the crowd saying that he was asking for forgiveness, but he asked who let him through. No one wanted to move because the crush started. Garius couldn't get through, even though he asked. The guy thought wearily that he was stuck. He can't move. Suddenly, the crowd began to cheer. Garius looked up and saw the royal family come out onto the balcony. People began to whisper in surprise that it was the prince. But why was he here? Jared shouted loudly that they must be surprised that he came here as a hero. They must have been thinking about the ugly appearance that carried the holy sacrament. The prince raised his hands and said that the holy sword and the holy sacrament are the treasures of this country and cannot be used by anyone but a hero. Therefore, using their true power, a curse appears that makes the appearance ugly. Garius thought, what a blatant lie. Jared said that the demon capital was destroyed. However, this is not his only achievement. From this moment on, he promises to serve for the benefit of everyone here for the rest of his life. Garius thought he didn't care. There was a demon here. He doesn't care what happens to the prince. But he has to hurry to find the demon. Suddenly, the mysterious guest jumped up from his seat shouting that he would take revenge on everyone. Garius turned around in fright, but the prince did not understand what was happening. A man who used magic appeared in front of the prince. Garius thought excitedly that it was an airy blade from a sword blade. Just don't tell him. The stranger hit the prince on the arm. Garius thought it was a sylphid blade. Jared tried to move away, but he couldn't. He lost his arm. Goat shouted angrily that he was a demon. He grabbed his sword and headed towards the scoundrel. Golta pointed his sword at the stranger's neck. Garius noticed this and grabbed his coin. He threw a coin into the general's blade with great force, which is why he, a stranger, was able to defend himself. The stranger practically disappeared into thin air. Goaty couldn't do anything with it. The stranger quickly ran into the alley. The general noticed that something glittered on the floor. He thought it was a gold coin. Got was shocked to think that this could not be. Garius set off through the old and broken streets. The guy saw a man who was burning through his health. He sniffed and smelled it again. Garius thought that the scent of the invisible balm was very subtle, which meant that they must be somewhere in the area. The guy went behind the old house and saw a fanged grimace. The guy came closer and saw not quite a man on the ground. Garius anxiously asked how his injury was. The stranger shuddered and glared at the guy. Garius looked at him in surprise. He was very nice. The half-man shouted in displeasure what he was doing here. The guy awkwardly told him to stop. He apologizes for dumbfounding him. He begs you to put away his weapon. Garius calmed down and said, well, he's not an enemy, but he's not an ally either. In any case, he doesn't have a fracture, he can tell him about it. The guy showed the bottle and said that he should use a healing potion. Garius said it wouldn't be able to completely heal him, but it would help a lot. The half-man turned away and shouted in displeasure that he did not accept help from people. In addition, it may be poison disguised as a potion. The guy quickly drank the potion. The cat looked at him in surprise. Garius opened the bag and took out a new potion. He complained that to think that he drank a healing potion simply because he was tired of shopping, he lives richly. The guy handed over the potion and said that his name was Garius, and his name was Garius, and his name was... The cat excitedly replied that it was Lippy. The cat sniffed the potion to make sure it wasn't poisoned. Garius looked at him with a smile and sighed. He asked with interest why he attacked the prince. Lippy screamed furiously to exact revenge for the demon lord. Garius wondered with displeasure what he should do about it. It turns out that the target of the half-man is him. Lippy stared at the guy's face. He asked excitedly, is he by any chance the wrong person who guided him? Garius asked in surprise what it meant to direct. Lippy said that the man who had a personal grudge against the hero and gave him this dagger. Garius asked if he hadn't said that he didn't accept help from people. The cat screamed in embarrassment. This and that are different things. He must use all available methods. Garius thought that despite this, the blade of the sylphid should be the property of the royal family. The transfer of the blade must mean something bad. The guy talked Lippy into giving him more details about the man who brought him in. Suddenly, something flew past the guy's face. Garius managed to throw Lippy aside so that he wouldn't get hurt. The guy looked up and saw the armor. Garius complained that it was General Gota. The man laughed out loud and said that to think that he would be here. Garius noticed the knights who surrounded him from all sides. Gata said, well, it saves him a lot of trouble. He can enjoy his luck. Libby and Garius looked at him angrily. The guy asked what he meant. Ghetto smiled angrily and shouted that everything was as he said. He found the traitor. This is Sharius, the traitor who brought the demon to the royal capital and planned the murder of the prince. Garius asked in shock what the traitor was. He said it was a misunderstanding. He didn't carry it out. The guy was shocked to think that the secret was about a demon possessing a royal treasure. According to him, it saves him from unnecessary problems. Garius said that he did not understand what was being said. Garius looked into Gata's eyes and shouted furiously that they were the leaders of the attack on the prince. He did not expect that it was the general who looked most loyal to the king who would betray him. The guy said to think that the most powerful general of this kingdom had lost himself in forbidden love, or maybe he was aiming for the throne. Gote asked with a smile who knew what he was talking about. Garius said not to make it up. Wasn't he the one who brought the demon and he didn't make it attack? Nevertheless, the blade of the sylphid was something unexpected, and it was incredible that they had taken it out. If that's the case, then the queen clearly had her hand in all of this. The guy added that, considering that he is bad at swordsmanship and magic, but his mind works very fast. Gota grabbed his sword and shouted loudly that, however, the dead do not tell fairy tales. He can curse his failure. Garius drew his sword. Got laughed out loud and shouted hysterically that he was going to fight him using that blunt sword, against his ability to manipulate his body, moving the force. The guy grabbed his sword tighter and prepared to fight back. Garius looked at the man's muscular arms as well as at his entire body, which had grown dramatically. Garius thought that the blessing bestowed on Gata allowed him to strengthen his body as well as move his power to any limb he wanted, literally a divine gift. On the other hand, Garius's blessing is something else. The guy said that he underestimated him. Garius thought that the ability to use an element whose true nature is to control the user's body. If you allow the blessing to take control of your body by taking even an ordinary knife, then the blessing will tell you the amount of power needed to parry the attack. The guy did just that. Garius plunged the knife into Gote. The man asked in surprise what it was. The guy furiously said that this was a blessing given to the hero, his main element. The knights and Libby looked at Garius in shock. The guy said that there is always a limit on the number of people against whom he can apply his blessing. Garius said, well, if someone of your level underestimates him, then even a simple knife will be enough to take him down. The guy pulled out a knife, and Gote fell to the ground, no longer able to fight. Garius took a breath and shouted loudly that it served him right for conspiring with the queen and trying to take control of the kingdom. It's a fitting fate for someone who gave a royal treasure to a demon and planned the prince's murder. The knights looked at the guy in shock. Garius turned his head and called Lippy. He held out his hand and asked the cat to lend him this sword. The guy created a wind sweat and flew into the air with Libby. The knights took out a bow. The chief shouted for them to shoot arrows. They shouldn't let the criminals escape. They fired arrows, but Garius and Lippy were already gone. The queen was brought before the king. The girl screamed in fright that no, he was wrong. It's some kind of mistake. She didn't do anything wrong. Isabel didn't expect her plan to be revealed. The king shouted loudly for her to be silent. No one is allowed to pick up the blade of the Sulfito except him and the prince, as well as her. He was very angry with the queen. A knight approached the ruler with the words that he should wait a little, he should listen to him. The king smiled angrily. The king's entourage, remembering the last time the king had such a crazy smile, shudder. However, that's a different story for next time. From now on, they have to watch the adventures of a real hero who has left the kingdom. A new adventure of the strongest hero has begun. People were running fast through the forest. The girl in the raincoat excitedly shouted that they needed to run faster. Someone noticed and shouted to his subordinates that they were being followed. They can't let them escape. Suddenly, the boy fell and screamed. Someone reached out and grabbed Samur. The man in the raincoat hugged the boy. A man with a dagger approached them and said with an evil smile that they were caught. Suddenly, the man was shot with fire. It turned out that the girl had protected her friends who were in trouble. She screamed furiously for them to run away faster. Garius and Lippy were flying over the forest after escaping from the castle. The guy decided that they were far enough away, so he landed on the ground. They can finally calm down. The guy put Lippy on the ground and said that they had gone far, so they would be safe. The cat looked at Garius excitedly and ran away from him. Lippy angrily asked what it was. He defeated the strongest general. He's some kind of first-class traveler. He is only such an explanation. Garius replied that he was a former hero. Lippy asked in shock what he had said. The guy said that his wounds hadn't been completely healed yet, so he shouldn't be twitching like that. Lippy got mad at him. Garius awkwardly said that he should know that there seemed to be no way without it. The guy looked at the sword from the royal treasury and just threw it. Lippy looked at the sword in surprise. He did not expect this. He excitedly shouted what he was doing. Garius replied that he had killed many of his people, and if he wanted to take revenge on him, he would already become his opponent. The cat grabbed the sword and angrily asked why he had saved it. Garius replied that he had changed his mind about demons after the battle with the Demon King. Lippy asked in surprise what was wrong with Shizzle. Garius said that for sure their king was alive. The cat screamed in shock, but was told that the Demon King had died in a single fight. The guy awkwardly replied that it was all right, but where would he start? The guy and the monster were facing each other. Skizzle said that who would have thought that he would be cornered? No, the outcome has already been decided. He can make his decisive strike. The hero stared at the king. Shizzle is surprised. What is it? Why is it standing? Garius didn't say anything. The demon said that he would heal if he didn't hurry. The man didn't say anything. They looked at each other. Skizzle shouted angrily why he was silent. He had forgotten that it was his turn to speak. Garius awkwardly asked what, he wasn't sure. The guy gathered his thoughts and said that he was to blame. Just thinking. The Demon King shouted in displeasure that he had confused him. He should hurry up and finish his job already. Garius grabbed his sword. Suddenly, they abruptly raised their heads from the loud noise. They saw that someone was attacking the king's castle. Buildings began to collapse and fall apart. The guy shouted in shock that the Demon King's castle had been attacked. Shizzle calmly asked that the hero did not know about this, but it would not be now, but immediately after their battle. Garius shouted in shock that the guy shouted that it was impossible. Shizzle replied that if the Demon King dies, the demons give up the castle. No, all their territories. If the hero dies, people stop attacking and leave. Garius excitedly asked why. If he knew, then why did he fight him? The Demon King happily said that he had always made people suffer. He thought that they would take advantage of his absence to invade the castle, but most of his people managed to escape. Garius thought that he had known from the very beginning that he would not be able to win, and still. The guy said that it meant that their battle was unbearable. The king replied that he should not be stupid. Skizzle confidently said that he fought seriously. He will fulfill his role as the Demon King until the very end. The king does not want his actions to be doubted. Garius listened to him and said that if that was the case, then why did he accept this useless battle? Shizzle thoughtfully replied that buying time was a good excuse. To be honest, he was interested in him. The guy asked in surprise what was in it. The king said that a warrior in armor who won on the battlefield with his sacred sword. At the same time, his sword technique is precise and noble, and in order to determine the winner in a single battle, he will fight honestly. He acts like the perfect person. Shizzle looked at the ruined castle and said that he had to go to the castle to reduce the number of victims of his people as much as possible. Garius thought that demons sacrificed themselves to allow others to live peacefully. It's clear, as he thought. Garius looked down and thought that they were using meanness for their own sake to trample on demons. So aren't they the villains? A shadow appeared above them, and someone shouted that he was asking them to stop. A little girl with a tail and ears fell behind the king. Shizzle shouted in shock that there was a doll. The girl began to cry and stood in front of the Demon King. She spread her arms and screamed at him not to kill Grandpa. Shizzle excitedly asked what she was doing here. Kokoro screamed loudly that she begged him not to kill her grandfather. Don't kill him, she begs. Garius chuckled and thought that was it. The guy pointed a sword at them and thought that now they were really making a villain out of him. Shizzle closed his granddaughter and shouted that he was asking him to stop. This child is still too young, please, he can show mercy. Garius created a magic dome around them. Shizzle closed his eyes, but nothing bad happened. On the contrary, his wounds disappeared. Kukuru shouted joyfully that his grandfather's wounds had disappeared. The king asked in shock what had happened. Garius turned around and began to leave, saying that, in general, they needed to be told that he was dead. The guy went on to say that he would report that he had completely destroyed it without leaving a drop of blood. Shizzle wanted to say something, but didn't have time. Garius said that he was saying goodbye to him. Most likely they would never see each other again. Kukuru joyfully shouted that many thanks to the hero. Lippy said in shock that he wanted to say that. Garius looked away and said he couldn't kill them. It was very embarrassing for him to tell it. Lippy said that Kukuru was white there too. Garius looked into his eyes and said that he wanted to ask Lippy for something. He gave him the dagger, but he wants him to stop and think about it first. Garius said that he provoked him, saying that he would become opponents to him, but he did not want to die, and if he was attacked, he would fight. The guy went on to say that he would not ask him not to hold a grudge against the hero. Nevertheless, the Demon King accepted a single fight because he did not want young demons with the same bright future as him to die. Lippy gripped the dagger tightly. He trembled and said that he had taken the lives of so many of his kin. Lippy dropped the dagger and said that he had saved Shizzle and him. Garius went up to him and stroked his head to calm him down. Lippy began to cry harder. The guy said that at the royal ceremony for the return of the hero, he was great. Lippy grabbed him by the shirt and shouted that Dad and Mom. Garius continued stroking his head. The guy thought he was acting as ordered. Probably because of him, many other demons found themselves in the same situation as Lippy. Garius went on to speculate that he didn't want to die. But would he be able to fight a demon seeking revenge? He doesn't want Lippy to get hurt in a fight with him. The guy squatted down and began to collect pebbles on the ground. He felt that someone was watching him. He turned his head and noticed the demon. Garius asked what it was. Lippy came out from behind the tree and asked with interest what he was doing now. Garius asked if he was hungry. He's going to cook some food. The guy threw a stone. Lippy looked at him in surprise. He couldn't understand what he was doing. The pebbles bounced on the water. They touched the fish and it floated to the surface. Lippy looked at him excitedly. Garius went into the water to pick up the fish. The demon recovered from the shock and asked with interest how he did it. Garius threw him a fish and said that it was all his gift of the Master of Weapons. Allowing him to use any means with maximum efficiency, it is convenient. Lippy caught a fish, and Garius said that if he threw a fish or a stone, he would know exactly where they landed. The demon cried out in delight that it was incredible. The guy threw a stone again and said that in unfamiliar conditions it would be difficult. They built a fire. Garius fried the fish and handed one to Lippy. The demon gladly accepted it. He was very hungry. The cat began to eat quickly, and Garius watched him with a smile. Lippy ate his fish and looked at the fire. He asked what Garius was going to do now. The guy threw branches on the fire and said that it was not yet known. The demon happily shouted that then if he didn't mind, he didn't want to go with him. Garius asked in surprise what. Lippy excitedly replied that he was going to new lands in the distant forest. Garius excitedly told him to stop. If he hasn't forgotten, first of all, he's a man and a former hero. The demon shouted with a smile that everyone had accepted the royal hero, and since Shizzle was alive, he thought everything would be fine. He really wants the guy to go with him. Garius awkwardly said, who would even accept such an ugly man like him? Lippy said in surprise that he was ugly. The demon did not understand the essence of the problem. He said he was asking for forgiveness, but he didn't understand human standards of beauty. Garius thought that all demi-humans are of different shapes and appearances, so their ideas of beauty are different and depend on race. The guy said he understood. Lippy excitedly shouted that he was asking for permission, at least to meet with Shizzle. He stopped and grabbed his shoulder. He grunted in pain. The guy said that he had a fracture. He shouldn't twitch like that. Lippy made a cute face and stared at the man to let him meet the Demon King. The guy thought that, to be honest, he had always been needed by someone because of his gift. The guy looked at the demon. He excitedly thought that for the first time, he was genuinely needed by someone. Lippy looked at him with interest. The demon really wanted to know the answer from Garius about the king. Garius clenched his fists and said it was okay. Since this trip was without a specific purpose, he can join it. Lippy shouted joyfully that thank you very much. He groaned in pain again. The guy excitedly told him not to twitch. Garius said that then he also wanted to ask for something. Lippy asked, startled, what it was about. The guy smiled and replied that he was uncomfortable when he was being so polite. He wanted them to be on equal terms. It is not necessary to add a respectful particle to his name. Lippy shouted with a smile that it was good. He moaned again from the pain in his body. Garius complained that he would stop moving like that. He could wait a bit, and he would mix a stronger potion. Lippy lay down on the ground and watched as Garius prepared the potion. He took the finished potion and looked admiringly at his hand. His bones are completely healed. Then Lippy took a swim in the river, and together with Garius he caught a bird. They also held a training session. Lippy was tired and fell asleep quickly when night fell. Garius looked at him with a smile and grinned. He thought that being together with someone and having so much fun could become for him. Suddenly he felt a movement and abruptly jumped up from his seat. He saw a girl floating above the water. The girl turned to him and looked into his eyes with a smile. Garius said in shock who she was. He came to his senses and asked again who she was. The girl said he caught her. She's just a reader. She's none other than the one who protects him from the fall like that. Garius excitedly asked what it was. The girl smiled and bowed to him. She said that if he wanted to know, she was the one who watched and coexisted with him. The guy asked in shock what she was saying. He heard the voice of the king, who said that the hero is Garius. There are sacred treasures devoted to this strange one. The guy thought that was his name. Garius looked at the girl and thought that Elsinard. He said that she was some kind of deity or spirit dwelling in sacred treasures. She complained that it was ridiculous to call her a deity, but if you choose two of them, then she is the second. The guy asked tensely that she needed something from him. The girl turned her back on him and said with a smile that yes, she thought yes, he needs to move. She pointed her finger at the path and said that, since this was a rare case, he could intervene once. Garius looked at the forest to see what she wanted. The girl said he had to go east. The guy looked at her in shock. She added that there are people there who need his help. Lippy and Garius were making their way through the forest. The demon watched the hero with interest. He stopped and asked what had happened. The guy mumbled awkwardly. Lippy hesitantly said that he had been acting strangely since the morning. Garius asked the girl what he needed to go east. She replied that she did. This meeting will be a good impetus for him to find himself. The girl smiled and said that everything depends on him. However, he will create these bonds himself. But it would be uninteresting to miss it. Well, then she will continue to observe for now. Garius looked at Lippy with a smile and thought that even if it was a trap, the far forest was still to the east. He said no, nothing. He looked in the woods and thought, so far. Garius thought with displeasure that he just needed to do what he saw fit. He doesn't want to go back to a time when he was only following orders. The guy noticed the people who were sitting near the campfire. Garius and Lippy hid behind a tree. The guy said tensely that it looked like they had guests here. The demon excitedly asked that they were bandits. Garius replied that no, they had moisture. Most likely they were royal mercenaries. The guy happily thought how timely they were. He will get information from them. One of the mercenaries approached the adult man. He waved at him and shouted that the leader should know that he was back. The man looked at him and sternly asked what was where they were. The guy excitedly replied that he had met a good informant. Lippy said with displeasure that there are about 20 elves there and, as expected, all are incredibly beautiful. Garius told him to keep going. Lippy said that this Folter was lucky to find these elves, who are now in their captivity. They tied them up with ropes so they couldn't resist. They ignored the women and are now celebrating with a drink. Great, I think we need to grab them before anything happens, as they say. Forge iron while it's hot. The mercenary laughed and said it sounded good. His friend replied that the elves were selling well, and the mercenaries would be able to find a special approach to them. The guy excitedly shouted that he was right. Lippy said furiously that they were just terrible. Garius took the dagger and told the demon not to go anywhere. Lippy shouted in shock that he wanted to go Alienware. Lippy shouted in shock that he wanted to go alone. It's reckless. Garius shouted furiously that it was easier than he thought. He thought that honestly, for whatever reason, he was fighting for people. The guy flew high. The mercenaries looked at him in shock. Garius raised his hand to throw the dagger. He quickly began to throw his weapon at them. The mercenaries screamed loudly in pain. They did not expect an attack at this moment. The guys tried to shoot a bow, but Garius was the first to kill them. The leader looked in shock at his subordinates who were falling to the ground. Garius landed on the ground and told the leader that it looked like he was the only one left. The man asked in surprise what was going on. He only saw his subordinates who were lying at his feet. Garius waved his hand, and the leader asked what he was. The guy hit a tree next to the man's head. Garius said furiously that he was asking the questions here. The leader screamed loudly and scared him. Garius turned towards the demon and said that everything was fine. Libby looked at the man in shock. Libby went to the guy and excitedly said that he had beaten them all alone. The demon asked that he killed them. Garius confidently replied that no, he had not killed. He looked at the wagon and said that they could take their biggest wagon. The demon asked what only horses could do. Garius began to carry the boxes into the cart, saying that if about 20 elves were captured there, they would need food. We need to think about what to do after their release. Lippy said that if they took all the food, then these people would be in trouble. The guy put the box down and asked if he was showing them mercy. Lippy replied sheepishly that he wasn't. Even if they are bad, you can't take their lives. The demon excitedly added that it was probably not for him to say this, since he was trying to kill the hero. Garius replied that he did. He thought that was why, even with his strength and the sulfide dagger, he couldn't kill Jared. The guy said that Lippy has a kind heart, and he steals food for a reason. They got into the carriage and set off. Garius said that they would have to return to the base to replenish their food supplies, and during that time they would not be able to hunt the other half-humans. Libby replied that it was understandable. Then all those who did not manage to escape could be saved. Garius was sitting inside the wagon with his eyes closed. He said that yes, it's all right. He apologizes to Lippy, but he can drive the cart. He wants to rest a little. The demon replied that of course he could rely on him. Garius thought with displeasure that shouldn't she be looking out for him? He's sure it's that girl from the lake. The sky darkened and the wind rose. The guy asked how much time had passed. Libby replied that it was about 30 minutes and there was still a fire ahead. The guy looked ahead and really fired. Garius told him to sit back down. Lippy excitedly said that there might be even more of them this time. Even he can help. The guy confidently shouted for him to wait for him here. The guy pushed off the ground and wearily said that no, he was asking for forgiveness. He's a little on edge. He'll call him if he needs him, so he asks you to please sit here. Lippy hesitantly replied that it was fine. Garius looked at the demon intently. The guy jumped up sharply, and Lippy could only stare after him. The mercenaries happily raised their glasses, and the head shouted that it was time to bring the elves here for entertainment. The guys shouted joyfully that they had been waiting for this. The mercenary approached the bound elves. The elf girl glared at the man. The man smiled and asked why she was looking at him like that. Okay, then he'll start with her. Garius thought that people really were. He stood in front of the mercenary and stabbed him in the neck. He protected the elves. Garius furiously asked that, interestingly, all people are just as disgusting. The head shouted in shock who else he was. The guy quickly ran towards him and stabbed him with a dagger. Then he did the same to another mercenary. Garius left the mercenaries on the ground and headed for the others who could still stand on their feet. People took out their swords and pointed them at the guy who had killed their friends. The guy thought tensely that there were only 3 people left. Garius grabbed his dagger and ran at the people. Suddenly he stopped and sat down on the ground with a cry. The mercenary shouted joyfully that his magic was finally over. This scary guy was about to get it, but he had a good weapon. The scoundrel shouted loudly that if it was without magic, then it was an ordinary dagger. The mercenaries ran at Garius from all sides. The guy quickly raised his dagger and deflected the bandit's blow. He quickly swung it and hit the mercenaries in the leg and neck. He quickly dodged the blow from behind and raised his dagger hand. He thought that the weapons master was aiming to break the sword. The mercenaries walked past Garius and asked in shock what was going on. Garius hit him in the head. Garius lowered the guy to the ground and breathed heavily. The last mercenary came up to him and laughed out loud. He happily said that he was trying to scare him, but he was already exhausted. The mercenary hysterically shouted that he would not kill him. When his friends woke up, he would sell him for more. Garius tried to get up, but his whole body shook. He thought that not only his stamina, but he had used all his inner strength necessary to use the master of the guns. Garius was able to raise the dagger. He pointed it at the mercenary and quietly said that he was not completely sure, but he had no choice. The mercenary asked with a smile what he said, but don't say that he will beg for mercy. Garius used magic, and the mercenary shouted angrily what kind of jokes were these. Garius hit him in the head, and the bandit only managed to ask what it was. His body staggered and fell. The guy was able to destroy all the mercenaries and save the elves from their hands. The guy thought wearily that he had somehow managed to kill him. He used all his magic power to slay him with the wind blade. Even using a master of weapons, it was not easy for him. Lippy ran up to him shouting that he was fine. Garius looked at the elves and replied that he didn't have to worry like the elves. The demon replied that while he was fighting, he had freed them. A guy came up to them and said he was a hero of the people. Garius looked away tensely. Lippy awkwardly said that they had asked him about the whole situation, so he told them everything. He asked for forgiveness. The guy replied that it was okay. The elves stared at Garius. The guy looked down excitedly. He thought that if you look at the situation through their eyes, maybe they didn't need the help of a hero. He noticed how the elves had sunk behind the ground. The elves knelt in front of him and began to bow. The elf guy shouted loudly that he was very grateful to him for saving them. The elves are very happy that nothing happened to them. Garius asked in surprise what was going on. The guy replied with a smile that he asked very much to be allowed, as the son of the patriarchs Miguel, to express gratitude to him on behalf of all of them. Garius excitedly shouted that no, they didn't need to be so respectful at all. Miguel turned towards the girl and said that this girl was his younger sister Lilia. The girl was sitting near a tree and looked at Garius with displeasure. Miguel said that he could talk to him and Lily without being treated respectfully. The girl jumped up from her seat and angrily asked what her brother was saying now. Lilia shouted furiously that Miguel should not belittle in front of this guy. People have destroyed their lands. Their father suffered so much. She looked at the guy and said furiously that he was a hero. Garius looked at her awkwardly. Miguel, displeased, asked Lilia what she could stop. Garius said that no, it's okay, he doesn't have to worry. The girl pouted with displeasure. Garius awkwardly said that everything she said was true. In fact, that she was the only one reacting strangely. The guy looked at Miguel and said that anyway. Garius asked what they were going to do now. He and Lippy go to the new lands where the half-humans have escaped. Miguel replied that they were going there too, since their village had been destroyed, but unfortunately they were caught by city mercenaries. The guy said that since they were on their way, he would like them to go there with them. Miguel said in shock that no, that is, he did not want to be rude. The elf excitedly said that they definitely wouldn't bother them. Many of them don't even know how to fight, so he sadly has to give up. Garius interrupted him and said that he asked him not to worry about it. Lilia asked with displeasure what he would do when he came to the new lands. Garius felt dizzy and tried to say that he didn't know yet. Everything began to spin and darken. Garius lost consciousness and Lippy excitedly shouted what was wrong with him. Garius was a child. He heard people running away from him shouting that it was an orc again. He had to run away. Garius stammered that he was asking to stop. The child shouted with a smile that no, he did not want to be captured by the orc. Garius looked after them sadly. He was depressed about it. The guy heard the sounds. He turned his head and saw a cat meowing loudly. The animal came up to him and began rubbing against his legs. Garius stroked him and said that at least he would be with him. Suddenly, someone shouted his name. Garius grabbed Lippy's head. The demon shouted in displeasure at what Garius was doing in a half-doze. The guy opened his eyes and sleepily asked what Lippy was doing here. They were in the carriage. Lippy awkwardly said that he suddenly passed out after the fight. He thought that he would recover soon and came to tell me. Garius replied that it was understandable, he must have scared him. Lilia came up to them and asked with displeasure what the two of them were doing here. Harry and Lippy looked at her in surprise and asked what it was. They didn't notice her. Lippy got off the guy and excitedly asked that he was feeling well now. Garius replied with a smile that he already had. The demon exhaled joyfully and said, "Thank heaven." He turned around and shouted that then it was time for us to go. Miguel was calling them there. Garius shouted that he was already running. Libby quickly went down the stairs and stood on the ground. He said that Miguel probably needed his advice on something. Garius looked at Lily. He began to move slowly towards the stairs with the thought that he was very uncomfortable. Lilia exhaled and said there was something else she hadn't said yet. Lily stood in front of the dumbfounded Garius. The girl said that, as the daughter of the chief of the village of Allenville, she should express her official gratitude to him for saving her. Many thanks to him. Lilia excitedly said that so far he is capable of being both a man and a hero. Garius sighed in surprise. Lilia blushed and turned away in embarrassment. She said exactly what, just so he knew. She hadn't recognized him yet. The girl ran away screaming for him to move, which froze him. Garius looked after her in surprise. He did not expect this at all. The guy smiled broadly and thought that it was difficult to please her. But she is a straightforward girl. Garius met with an elf. Miguel asked with a smile that he was awake. Garius excitedly replied that he was sorry that he had thrown all the leadership at him. The elf shouted loudly that it was not difficult for him. The most important thing is that he was able to rest even a little. Miguel approached the guy with the map. Garius asked with interest how they had arrived. The elf replied that they had gone north from the place where they had been caught last night, and now they were right in front of the great river. Miguel looked at the fast-flowing river and said that until they finally reached the mountain range. When they crossed the river, there are more groves, deserts, and meadows waiting for them. Garius asked if they would go through all this in a cart. Miguel began to shake with excitement, and he said that it would be quite difficult, given all the slopes on the way. Miguel went on to say that if they made a detour through the north, they would probably get there faster by wagon than on foot. Garius replied that no, it was better for them not to go there by wagon. The guy added that if they go through the north, they risk getting caught by the royal army. Lilia shouted for him to stop. While they haven't decided yet, isn't it possible to cross the great river in wagons? Miguel said it was useless. They should just take their food supplies and cross the river themselves. Garius confidently replied that no, they would take everything. Lilia and Miguel asked in surprise what. Garius replied that if they could assemble rafts for the wagons, they could drag them across the river with the help of horses. Someone asked what they would do with the rafts here and now. Miguel replied that yes, that was the plan. There were ropes in the stolen supplies. Lilia asked with displeasure if there would be enough rafts to fit 4 wagons. Miguel noticed the weapon in Garius's hands and asked if he really wanted to cut down a tree with some ordinary blade. Lilia shouted in displeasure, which is for sure. He'll have to work hard to make at least an incision for them. Libby shouted confidently that she didn't have to worry because they were talking about Garius. Garius took the sword more comfortably and exhaled heavily. He thought that his physical strength had not fully recovered yet, but he now had enough internal strength to use a weapon master. Garius swung his sword and made a cut. The trees fell and raised all the dust. The elves and Libby looked at him in surprise. Lilia cried out in delight that he had indeed cut them down. The guy said that he would take care of the trees so that the others would chop branches from them and tie them into logs. Miguel happily replied that he understood. Garius cut down the trees and the elves worked on them. Lilia walked up to the man and shouted loudly that just a second. Garius asked with interest what had happened to Lilia. The girl furiously shouted that her name was Lilia Nia. He should not address her so casually. Garius replied that it was clear he was to blame. He would be more attentive. He awkwardly asked what it was all about. Lilia asked loudly what it meant, what it was. He does the most work. The guy replied with a smile that there was just a lot that only he could do, so he wasn't asking for help from anyone. Lilia excitedly asked that he remembered how he had passed out recently. Garius looked at her in shock and excitedly asked if it really meant that she was worried about him. Lilia blushed and shouted in embarrassment what he was saying. The girl blushed more deeply and shouted furiously that he had misunderstood everything. She just doesn't like that they make him do all the work while they cool off. Garius hesitantly said that if it was true, he was asking for forgiveness. Lily ran away screaming that it was okay, he could look. She stretched out her hand and said that the spirits of fire, the spirits of the forest, Garius shouted in shock at her to stop, because she wasn't going to use fire magic. The girl shouted loudly that she was summoning the flame. A fiery funnel formed. She said that Liliania from Ellenford was calling them. They had to come. Lilia stretched out her arms and shouted that he had to cut through it. It was time to flare up. There was a fiery explosion. Garius and Lilia looked at the effects of magic in shock. The girl turned and excitedly told him what he was seeing now. Garius said he was amazed. She had amazing powers of control. Lilia proudly replied, which was natural. Garius added that she was sweating. The girl fiercely replied that she couldn't give a damn about 6 more of them. Lilia ran away screaming that she needed one more thing. She really needed it. They built the boards and put them under the wagons. They managed to cross the lake and transfer all the things. They looked at each other with smiles. It was the middle of the night. A week later, everyone went to rest and sleep. Lilia felt that something was wrong. She noticed a sad Miguel. She asked what it was. Lippy woke up because of her. The elf replied that he thought it looked like their water supplies were starting to run out. Miguel went in to say that for the sake of quickly bypassing rivers where they could become easy prey, they increased their pace, but in exchange spent more supplies. Lilia bent down and sadly asked that this was not enough. Lilia shouted joyfully that it was right. She covered her mouth with her hand and looked at Garius, who did not wake up from her scream. Lippy replied that he had not seen it himself, but he smelled the water. It was definitely there. The girl admiringly said that the sense of smell of werewolf cats is completely different. Lippy happily said that they could put on it. He'll run down there and get them some water. Lilia threw on her hood and said that then she would go too. The 2 of them would carry away more. The girl added that besides they can't lose him. The demon replied with displeasure that this was already an insult. Miguel said it was understandable. They should ask Garius for advice. Lilia confidently replied that he was tired. There was no need to wake him up. Miguel looked at the sleeping Garius and said uncertainly that they were sure of it. Lippy asked with a smile that he was an alarmist. The elf replied that if something happened, he was an alarmist. The elf replied that if something happened, he would protect Lily. Everything would be fine. The demon shouted that these were his words. The guy replied that he understood. Lippy happily pointed to the source and said they had to make sure she wasn't in any danger. Lilia said in surprise, which is amazing. They really found a stream. The demon laughed proudly. Lilia asked the cat with interest why he was traveling with Garius. Lippy poured water and replied that he had attacked a hero in the capital. The meeting was not very good. The girl screamed in shock what he had done. Lippy awkwardly replied that he wasn't looking at Garius. He attacked an imposter. He just wanted to avenge Shizzle and everyone, but he couldn't, and he was almost killed, and then Garius saved him, and they escaped together. Garius saved him, and they escaped together. Garius is the hero, and he cares about them. Garius is different from other people. The demon smiled broadly and said that he was really glad that he had met him. Lilia blushed and awkwardly replied that it wasn't that she didn't understand what he was getting at. She doesn't hate him either. Whippy replied in a matter-of-fact tone that he knew about it. Lilia excitedly asked what he was saying. The demon asked with a smile that is, even before they left. She took care of Garius' sleep because he was so tired. The cat added that this is not done to those whom they hate. Suddenly, Lippy twitched. Lilia asked uncertainly if something was wrong. The demon covered her with his hand and told her to be quiet. Judging by the steps, this is a group of 10 people. No, there are a lot of them approaching. They heard someone approaching. They heard someone approaching. Libby got to his feet and told Lilia to take the canteens and run. The girl screamed in shock at what he was saying. Don't tell me what he wants. The demon handed her a flask and told her that everyone has their own strengths. He's smart, so while he's distracting their attention, she should go and warn everyone. Lippy waved and smilingly told her to give Garius his regards. The girl looked after him in shock. The demon screamed loudly to get attention. The cat screamed loudly that it was a river, there was water here. The mercenaries heard the screams. The man asked what's over there. It's a surviving demon. Don't they give a reward for demons? If they take him hostage, they might catch his allies as well. People began to approach Lippy. The demon pretended that he had not seen them before and shouted loudly that there were people there. He quickly began to run away. The mercenary shouted for the demon to stop. Lilia clutched the flask in her hands and thought that she was asking for forgiveness. She ran with the idea that Lippy should forgive her. She was speeding through the forest and thought that was it. Lilia was out of breath and excitedly thought that it was all because of her. After all, she hadn't asked Garius for advice. She remembered Lippy's big smile and began to cry. Suddenly, she stopped and saw people. They looked at her in surprise and sighed. The men grinned and said that it was an elf. Lily looked at them in fright. The mercenary shouted that it was an elf. Lilia turned and tried to escape. The man surrounded her and shouted that she would not leave them, maybe not even try. Lilia thought tensely that she was surrounded. The girl looked at them angrily. She threw a flask at one guy. Lily put her hands out and screamed that the spirit of fire, the spirit of fire. The mercenary held out his hands to her and asked what she thought. They would let her do it. Lilia thought she should at least warn the others. She opened her mouth to call for help. Someone told her not to scream. No need. Garius came out of the shadows and said it would be over soon. He hit the mercenary who was reaching for the girl. Lilia looked at him in shock. The girl started crying and shouted that Garius was here. The guy grabbed the sword tighter and looked at the enemies. The mercenaries shouted that he was a loser. How dare he? Garius waved his hand and destroyed 2 mercenaries with one blow. The guy defeated terrible people. He took their heads off because they wanted to hurt Lilia. The girl screamed that Garius. She grabbed his shirt and screamed that Lippy was there. She was very sorry. The guy told her to calm down. Lilia tearfully said that she was only thinking about her safety, so she ran away. Garius replied that everything was clear to him. The guy picked up the flask and said that then they should go back to the others. The girl asked in surprise, what? She said Lippy. Wouldn't they go rescue him? Garius replied that yes, that's right. The mercenaries led Lippy in front of them. The mercenaries asked that they really do it here. There was no one nearby. By all indications, there was someone's camp here. Lippy excitedly thought that he hoped Lilia had returned safely to the others. The mercenaries put a sword to the demon and angrily told him to finally answer them. Lippy said he felt danger. Something was coming here. The mercenaries grudgingly asked that he wanted them to abandon him. The guy said with a smile that they were trying to sell his comrades. Usually, crazy demons like him are abandoned. The mercenaries smilingly added that, as expected from the demon. The guy put his hand on his shoulder. The mercenaries laughingly asked why he was so sudden. He saw that his friend was injured. Suddenly, the mercenary dropped his friend because someone had taken his hands off. He only managed to ask what. The mercenaries began to shout that this was an enemy attack. Someone started defeating them one by one. The mercenary shouted for him to finally show up. He was stabbed in the arm with a sword. The remaining mercenaries raised their hands in the air and shouted that they were surrendering. They'll let the demon go. They will even give them their money. They shouted that please forgive them, but don't run away. Garius stood in front of them. The mercenaries cried and said that they were just refugees who had been ordered to hunt, so please, he should let them return home. Garius stabbed them with his sword and got rid of the mercenaries. Garius said furiously that he would not spare them. The elves greeted Garius and Lippy excitedly. Lilia shouted joyfully that Lippy was here. She hugged him and with tears in her eyes said that she was so glad, she was very glad. The demon excitedly said that Lilia was safe too. Lippy hugged her back and told her that she was fine. It was unlikely that he could win, so he gave up. Garius said Lippy did a good job, but he generally feels guilty. Miguel said that it was only thanks to Garius's instructions that they were able to avoid major problems. Lilia shouted, "That's for sure." Garius replied wearily that no, it wasn't. The guy thought that he understood what was going to happen in the coming days, and to protect everyone, he couldn't just retreat and run away. He continued to reason that he would not spare anyone. From now on, he will definitely destroy any pursuer he encounters, he promises. Garius was running away from a mercenary. Lippy ran from above and watched the scoundrel. Garius raised his head and shouted for Lippy to attack from the right side. The demon shouted loudly that yes. Toriah. He threw a sword at the mercenary and the guy screamed loudly, but he couldn't fight anymore. Garius said that he seemed to be quite good at using wind-class weapons. Lippy laughed happily. Lilia cried out in delight that Lippy was so amazing. The demon proudly said that, in fact, Garius had taught him that. He is very grateful to him for this. Garius fired a bow and hit a bird. She fell to the ground, and Lippy shouted joyfully that he was wondering if Garius could teach him how to use a blade and a bow. The guy replied that if he wanted to use them, he needed a magic class. Lippy asked with interest that he didn't know if he would be able to choose. He has the abilities of the wind, so he can choose a weapon with it, and he also has the abilities of earth and water. Garius asked in surprise what all three were. Garius said that he had a rare magical gift. Lippy excitedly asked if he could use the mania. The guy replied that the proximity of land and wind would most likely suit him perfectly. It also seems to have good compatibility with water. Garius said that magic is usually difficult to use, but looking at how he uses a dagger with wind energy, perhaps he will learn to handle objects with special attributes perfectly. Lippy happily asked if it was true. The demon enthusiastically asked if he could become like Garius. The guy replied that he was gifted, so it was his specialty. He cannot say that they are on the same level. They stood in front of the abyss and looked around. They came to the gate, and someone said that the last forest shelter was over there. Everyone looked joyfully at the gate, which was raised. Garius was shocked to say that this was the last forest refuge. Lilia shouted joyfully that this was the right place. They did it, really. The guy replied that yes, without a doubt. The girl grabbed Lippy by the arms, and together they shouted that yes, without a doubt, they got there. Miguel said he would talk to someone from the area. Garius replied that he understood. The guy thought he couldn't be accepted here. If he's not accepted, he'll have to travel alone. But right now, he's just happy that he was able to get everyone here. Lily called the guy. Demons approached them. The boar demon shouted joyfully that they were half-humans who had escaped from the kingdom. The demon dog said with a smile that it must have been difficult to get here. Welcome. Miguel waved at Lilia and Garius. The girl shouted joyfully that her brother had come. The elf said that they had talked to everyone and decided to arrange a festive dinner for them tonight, and something else. Miguel told Garius with a smile that there was someone who wanted to meet and talk to him. A demon came out with the words that he welcomes. The hero of the kingdom. It's been about 2 months. Garius said, shocked that it was him. The demon shouted with a smile that he was welcome to their brothers. Harius came closer to him. Shizzle said that the last promised lands had been returned to the country that they had revived by the half-humans. The foxes were pushed with great force. The animals screamed loudly. The fox got to his feet and coughed. He staggered on. A furious bear rushed after him. Next to the mountain in a small house. Garius opened his eyes a little and wondered where he was. He has a very bad headache. Lippy happily asked that he was awake. Garius stroked the cat's head. Suddenly, he turned sharply. Garius got up from the floor and awkwardly said that he was sorry. Lippy asked if he didn't want to pet him a little more. He could tell. The guy muttered awkwardly. The demon said he didn't mind. Garius happily asked if it was true. Lippy replied with a smile that he was not disgusted when he stroked his head. He was just a little surprised when he started doing it suddenly. Garius staggered and squeezed his eyes shut. Lippy excitedly asked if he was okay. The guy replied that he was okay. The guy replied that he was fine. It was just a consequence of the holiday. Yesterday's banquet was too crazy. Lippy said that everyone had so much fun. Garius and all the demons were sitting at the same table and chatting. Someone shouted for more snacks to be brought to them. He was told that yes, right now. Skizzle quickly drank his drink. The demon asked with a smile that it was interesting what the people of the kingdom were thinking. Skizzle complained that his potential was being wasted on such things. Lilia put her hands on his shoulders and shouted that he was right. Garius said, well, even he understands so much now. Skizzle asked what it was, then what he was going to do now. Garius answered uncertainly that he was. The king looked at him and said he didn't need to decide right away. He can relax and sit down. He can think about it while he's here. Skizzle patted him on the shoulder and happily told him that he was one of his guests. He can stay as long as he wants. Garius looked at him in surprise. He did not expect such an attitude. Garius screamed that his hand had stopped moving. The boar demon shouted that they should drink some more. Garius replied that he did. Currently, Garius tiredly said that nevertheless he had drunk too much, as expected. Lippy said he brought something good, as expected. Lippy said he brought something good. The demon showed him the bottle and said with a smile that it was a cure for a hangover. He got it from Lilia. An angry girl ran into the house screaming that she hadn't told him to keep quiet about it. Lippy replied that yes, she had said that. Lily shouted that he was so harmful. Garius opened the bottle and asked Lilia why she hadn't brought the medicine herself. The girl awkwardly replied that she just didn't want him to feel that he owed her something. Lippy said that she had said that she was just embarrassed. The girl furiously shouted that she was just embarrassed. The girl furiously shouted that she was too harmful. Lilia excitedly shouted that the most important thing was that they should explore the city as soon as he felt better. Garius replied that they were right. They would go together. The guy drank the potion and said they were going for a walk. The demon cat said with a smile that they were yesterday's half-humans. The lizard demon told them to take their time. The demon llama happily said that he too was a hero man. Garius excitedly said that it was so unexpected they were treating them so well. Lilia asked with interest that, interestingly, they also fled to this city. Garius hesitantly replied that it could be. He thought it would be interesting if people were kicked out of the house. Lippy shouted loudly that he was very hungry. Lilia replied that it was already noon. Lippy ran up the steps and shouted joyfully that it could be a dining room. Garius looked at the sign and replied that it was closed. Lippy knocked on the door and asked what the problem was. The guy was scared and thought that if it were the capital, they would throw a frying pan at you. The door opened and Lippy saw the boar demon. Lippy happily shouted that he was hungry, so please he could give him food. The demon replied with a smile that, of course. The demon added that they are still busy preparing, so they are not fully ready yet, but they can enter. Lily told the guy that they could go inside. Surprised, Garius replied that he was. Garius looked at the demon and thought that this was normal. He thought it was the orc master who looked quite good-natured. The demon asked if he had something on his face. Garius waved his hands and excitedly replied that he was not. He just looks like an orc he saw a long time ago. He didn't want to stare. The demon replied in surprise that it looked like an orc. It was strange to hear such a thing from a human. The demon looked at Lily and asked what he looked like to this elf woman, didn't he? Shocked, Garius asked what he meant. Lippy said with a smile that it was true. He thought so too. Lilia asked why he was so surprised. Wasn't it obvious? The demon said with a smile that bestial half-humans like him resemble boars and pigs. He can see how elegant his muzzle and fangs are. They went inside, and the guy said that he meant that he was nowhere near as good-looking as she was. Lippy exhaled and replied that they didn't understand how they, humans, thought. He doesn't understand Garius at all. Lilia replied that it was true. She thought so too. The girl waved her arms and screamed so that he would not misunderstand her. She is not interested in his appearance. Garius said in surprise that he wasn't interested. Lilia shouted that not in the slightest. Lippy asked with a grin that it was Lily. Why she was so worried. The girl screamed angrily to shut him up. With tears in his eyes, Garius happily thought that the half-humans didn't care about his appearance. The demon brought them food with the words that everything is ready. He apologizes for waiting. Lip asked with interest what Garius planned to do next. The demon added that they had talked about something similar yesterday. Garius replied that yes. He asked him if he wanted to stay with him as a guest. Lilia looked away excitedly. Garius confidently said that he wanted to continue living in this country. Garius added that this was why they couldn't stay as guests. They should be practical. Lilia joyfully shouted that. Then let's travel together. Lippy shouted with a smile that it was true. The guy awkwardly asked that he said it because he wanted to stay with him. Lily awkwardly turned away from him. Lippy excitedly replied that it was because Garius had problems with him. Garius thought that it looked like the two of them were really worried about him. He said that he is also. Garius smiled and said that he wanted to stay close to everyone. They approached the demon and shouted that they were grateful for the food. The demon asked them what they liked, and they liked his cooking. The guy confidently replied that yes, it was delicious. The demon said with a smile that he was glad to hear it from the mouth of a human. If nothing bothers him, he can come back. Garius replied with a smile that yes, of course. He would like to eat here every day. The elves and everyone else went to the part of the city where the harvest is growing. Someone shouted for all the new residents to listen to him. He is the mayor of Vortal Telios. Everyone covered their ears. The demon was too loud. Telios shouted with a smile that he was asking for forgiveness. His voice was quite loud. A mouse demon came up and said that he had a loud voice, but he was timid inside. Telios said that Sharetta would say something else. They don't care if the guys are heroes or villains. Telios looked at the elves, Lippy and Garius, and said they were welcome here. First of all, he thinks it's worth telling them a little bit about the city to make it easier to get used to it. Telios said that Rinmarasta was based in the center and then residential areas began to expand. Vortal is a little different from the rest of the districts. It is a village based on agriculture. The demon continued to tell, when the river began to narrow, rare species settled in the residential area. Species such as elves and wildcats have been assigned their own homes. Telios looked at Garius and asked what he would do. The guy thought about it and replied that he wanted to live outside the city on his own. Lippy and Lilia excitedly shouted what he wanted to do. Telios replied that he understood. Telios replied that he understood. It is his policy to respond to the wishes of his residents. He asked to be allowed to hear the reason. Garius replied that he had never felt comfortable among a crowd of people. As a child, he was teased a lot, and after moving to the capital, he spent his whole life in isolation, being a hero. The guy went on to say that they had definitely been through a lot together, and life with the elves would probably be calm and peaceful, but he feels that he will start to take it for granted, and their support will eventually spoil him. Garius said that's why he wants to live alone first and then gradually start a life with them. Miguel replied with a smile that they would respect Garius's wishes. In this case, he asks him to let him know if he needs anything. Telios shouted with a smile that it was true. He has no reason to reject his offer either. He will accept it. They have solved all their accommodation issues. They came to a place where there was dry land all around. Telios looked at the cabin and said that it was an abandoned observation hut that was built at the founding of the village. It's okay that he will live here until everything is ready. Telios opened the door and said that it looked a little dirty from the outside, but even worse inside. The floor is broken and all the windows are broken. The demon asked with a smile that he was sure he didn't want to live with elves. Garius replied with a smile that no, that was enough. Garius clenched his hands into fists and thought that this was a new beginning. He looked at the leaky ceiling with a smile and happily thought that his human life could finally begin. Telios mounted his horse and said loudly that then he would start collecting materials. Garius waved goodbye to him and replied that yes, thank you very much. Garius entered the house and said with a smile that, and now he can start cleaning from this place. Spiders lived in the corners of the hut, which had already woven a web, and mice were running around the ceiling. He tied a handkerchief so as not to breathe dust and began to collect all the cobwebs. He also found a well and took water to wash the floors. Garius came to the pig demon who asked that he wanted permission to cut down the forest. Garius replied that yes, he had heard that a certain number of finished logs were needed. She handed him a piece of paper and said that was right. Then he should sign here. The pig demon said that if he was going to transport raw materials, why not buy horses? They could arrange everything right here. Garius replied that it would be a good help. She added with a smile that if something bothers him, he can always come to the mayor's office. Garius came to the stable. The demon showed him the horses and said that this long-haired horse was popular in their country. Garius said they were a little bigger than the horses in the capital. The lizard demon said that they are very strong, but gentle and easy to care for. Garius stroked the horse, and the demon asked with a smile what he thought. This one has very strong legs. Garius replied that he saw it, then he would take it. The lizard said that the maintenance equipment has already been loaded into the cart. He cannot be shy. Garius awkwardly asked what he could do. The demon shouted with a smile that, of course, he's a citizen of this city. Telios came to Garius's hut. The demon asked with a smile how he was doing. He liked this city. The guy replied that everyone was very kind. How should I say? It was kind of exhausting. Telios shouted that, of course, for the sake of the growth of the city and the increase in population, they are ready to welcome everyone who wants to live here. Garius replied wearily that this did not mean that there would be too many residents here. Telios chuckled and said that it was true, Unfortunately, the economy of this country is oversupplied. The demon went on to say that this is why no one complains out loud. He is sure that there are people who complain about themselves. He should know that they don't want to lose the city with the highest population, their home. Telios said this could have happened if they had excluded people coming from outside. Garius thought that the true intentions of the demi-humans. His friends told him about it. Garius asked when he said that everyone was welcome here, he also meant people. Telios said that this was a difficult question. He needed to think about it and give an honest answer. The demon said it was difficult because Shizzle and he would answer yes to it. But some residents wouldn't say that. But he actually sets a good example. Garius asked what was a good example. Telios laughed and replied that in the end, they could let people in too. It's okay if they're useful. The guy thought that it meant that even if he was a man or a hero, he could get used to it. Garius went to the vegetable garden. He stuck the hoe into the ground and thought that other people were also being accepted, as well as a new foundation was beginning to take shape. He went on to argue that it is better than if each species is limited to its own territory. Therefore, he thought that the demi-humans lived as one community, but in the farthest country there are different species living together. At the banquet, Shizzle told him that the demi-humans have a strong bond. Garius made the beds and thought that Skizzle's intentions could go further, although this is a good way to prevent the extinction of endangered species, something like that. The boar demon came and said with a smile that he was grateful for his hard work. His muscles aren't that bad. Garius replied that it was actually his first time plowing a field, that he can use his ability to help others as a gift. The demon asked with interest if all people were like that. Garius replied that no, all people are different. His abilities are unique. The boar patted him on the shoulder and said that it was okay. He helped a lot. The guy replied that he was also glad that he could help. Lippy was sitting at the table. Suddenly, he noticed Garius and shouted that he was welcome back. Garius happily said that Lippy had come to him. He was glad about it. Lippy asked him if he could spend the night at his place today. Garius asked what the people at your residence said was normal. The demon replied that of course the old man and a woman said that everything was fine. Lippy told Garius to tell him what he was talking about with that old man Zeppel. The guy opened the pot and replied that he had invited him to help him work in the fields. Garius looked at Lippy and said with a smile that he had given him a lot of vegetables as a reward. He's going to make a stew tonight. The demon shouted joyfully that he loved Garius's stew. Night fell. Garius noticed a flash in the window. Garius looked at the sleeping Lippy and carefully opened the door. He left the house and walked around a bit. He closed his eyes against the bright flash. Garius noticed the long hair. He excitedly asked what Elzenater was. The guy looked at her worried and sad face and wondered what was bothering her. Garius asked what had happened at Elzenert's. She was fascinated by the moon again. The girl waved her head and looked into the forest. She replied that he had stopped. That evening she had heard a call for help. The girl went on to say that she could still hear it coming from there. Garius looked into the depths of the forest and asked who could call for help from the forest. Elzenard sadly replied that yes, such a weak voice. However, the Lord of the Forest rejected her. If she tries to enter the forest, the townspeople will get in trouble because of her. Garius asked who the Lord of the Forest was. The girl said that it was definitely a ghostly beast. Garius wondered what kind of ghostly beast it was. Elsenard said there was another way out. He can enter the forest instead of her. Garius replied that he understood that if he ignored it, he would not be able to sleep at night. But how could he go there? Elsenard said she had already discovered exactly where the call for help was coming from. The guy noticed a dog that was lying on the ground unconscious. He looked at him excitedly. Garius made a dash and grabbed the dog. The guy thought that the animal was clinging to life with the last of its strength. Would he be able to save him in time if he hurried back? He took a step and shuddered. He felt that there was something scary behind his back. Arius stared intently in front of him and stretched out his hand to his sword. He gripped the dog tighter. Garius hugged the animal to him and looked confidently at the road. He ran, and the monster began to crawl after him. The guy ran fast until he realized that he was there. He exhaled wearily. Garius looked at the forest and watched intently. Elsenard came up to him and shouted joyfully that he had returned. The guy said that there was such a strong thirst for blood. Garius looked at the dog and said that if he had fought, this poor guy would have been dragged into the battle. We need to take him to the doctor urgently. Elsinore looked after him and said that he entrusted the care of the creature with a weak voice to him. Libby jumped up and shouted loudly what had happened and also what the dog was doing here. Garius brought the animal to the hospital, which was closed, but they were admitted anyway. The doctor treated the animal's wounds and said that all the bones were intact. It looked like he was on the verge of death, but was able to survive by healing himself. The guy replied that it was understandable. What a relief. The doctor said he looked like a wolf, but he had never seen such animals before. What a sight. Garius replied that he just found him unconscious in the woods. The demon cat excitedly screamed what he had done. He found him in the forest. Garius awkwardly replied that he was. He did not expect such a reaction from a doctor to such ordinary information. The doctor said that apparently there is a huge beast in the forest, so he should not go there. Garius replied that he was sorry. He asked that the huge beast was also half human. The cat replied that he thought he was one of those people they called evil spirits. The demon continued to say that, for example, they can communicate with each other. He can ask the mayor about it if he is interested in details. Garius replied that he understood. Thank you. They went outside and the doctor said that the most important thing was to inform him if his condition suddenly changed. Garius replied that yes, he was sorry for disturbing him in the middle of the night. Libby waved goodbye to the cat. Morning came and the birds outside chirped. The dog happily stood up and began to yawn. Libby asked with interest that he was already completely healthy, wasn't he? The dog started running around the guy. Garius said he didn't think he needed to be treated anymore. Libby shouted with a smile that he probably had a grateful expression on his face. The dog stopped and looked at the guy with interest. Libby excitedly asked what, by the way, they should call him. Garius sighed and thought about it. He said that he hadn't really thought about keeping it for himself. Libby said that he had spent so much time in the forest. The demon asked if it wouldn't be dangerous to bring him back to the forest. Garius replied that he thought he was right. The guy hesitantly said that he needed a name. Garius said that then the path would be clear. The dog barked happily. Libby said with a smile that he just chose the name based on the color of the coat. But he thinks it's a good name. Garius came to the blacksmith. He hit the hammer, knocking a ringing sound out of it. The blacksmith laughed and said that he was surprised that he had succeeded the first time. He continued to speak. When Old Man Shizzle brought him, he was a little doubtful. A boar demon came to Garius and said he was looking for a job. They should go together. He would offer him some good options. The blacksmith said that he was thinking about working together in a tool shop. Together they will achieve a lot. Garius replied that he would give an answer when he gained some experience in this matter. Garius made a new tool in the blacksmith's shop. The dwarves surrounded him and started shouting that he was just amazing. He has to work for them. Then the guy came to the repair shop and made a locker. The mice shouted loudly that he was so talented they asked him to work for them. Night fell, and Garius came home with the demon. The boar demon shouted with a smile that he was so popular. The human hero has become in demand among the demons. The demon asked what he had decided where he wanted to work. Garius replied that no, he couldn't choose one thing. He tried a couple of activities that he liked. The guy went on to say that he had fun everywhere, so it seems to him that he should help them all. The demon asked what he was saying. It was fun everywhere. He shouted with a smile that it was good. A popular guy like him is sure to be very busy. Garius excitedly replied that he was happy to help everyone in need. The boar demon said that it looked like he was having fun with all his heart. Garius looked at him in surprise. The demon said when he made his choice, the next step would be... He shouted loudly that it would be a wedding. The guy coughed because he was drinking at that moment. Garius excitedly asked what the wedding was. The demon replied that he would do more work with his family. He asked what he thought about the elf with whom he was on good terms, how he would like this option. Garius asked in surprise what the lily was. He doesn't know if they'll make a good couple. The demon asked why, because they are from different social strata. Garius asked what was the first thing. He was a human being, he knew that. The demon hesitantly answered what he was saying. He's a human being, he can choose whom he wants. The guy looked at him in surprise. The demon said he didn't know anything about it. Different kinds of half-humans can't have a child, but a human and half-human couple won't have a problem with that. Garius said that he had heard about the triple, but the first was news to him. He went on to say that it was just that he had traveled with her several times. She was like a close friend and fighting partner to him. And Lippy and Miguel too. Love will only get them into trouble. The demon asked that he was sure of that. He said it sounded like he was desperate to protect them. He should know that this is a little suspicious. Garius said he hadn't gotten a job yet, so he couldn't think about such things yet. He's not even really used to the city yet, to be honest. The demon said with a smile that he didn't have to worry about it. He'll show him everything here. Orc women are wonderful. The guy asked in surprise that his Mrs., in the sense of a wife. He thought he was lonely. The demon replied that yes, he came here with his wife, but her consciousness suddenly deteriorated and she died. Garius asked that he had children. The orc replied that no, he was a decrepit old man. He has not been dependent on anyone for a long time. He needs to drink more. A woman will dominate a man who cannot drink. He dropped the glass on the table. Garius fell asleep right at the table. The demon picked him up and put him on the bed. He sat down at the table and told him not to worry. The whole city already knows him as an amazing man. He was left sitting alone. The demon heard the barking. He looked at Ao and asked, with a laugh, that he would be his interlocutor now. The orc looked at his reflection and said that he was a royal hero. He thought it would be more terrifying than that. The dog was watching the demon closely. Morning came and someone knocked on the door. Lilia came in and waved at Garius. She said good morning. She brought him the medicines and herbs he asks for. Garius excitedly replied that it was fine. The guy turned away and stroked the dog. He thought confusedly that he already had a bad memory of what he had asked for yesterday. Lilia asked if this was the Ao he had picked up in the forest. Garius replied that it was him. The girl held out her hand to him, saying that his blue fur was so beautiful. Ao bit Lily's hand. The guy and the girl looked at the dog in surprise. Lilia came to her senses and screamed loudly in pain. Garius anxiously shouted for Ao to stop. The girl said with tears in her eyes that she thought the animals loved him. Garius said he was sorry. He didn't expect Ao to do this. Garius took Lily's hand and said that he thought he was just playing, but it was better not to touch him anymore. The girl blushed at Garius's actions. He added that he would disinfect his hand just in case. Willie replied sheepishly that it was fine. Suddenly, the door opened abruptly, and Lilia interrupted. Someone shouted loudly that he was calling the hero. Garius turned in surprise, and a body crashed into him. He asked in surprise what was going on. The guy said in shock that it was a doll. The girl screamed loudly that she was asking him very much to make her a wife. Garius asked in surprise, what? Lilia also couldn't figure out what was going on. Kokoro shouted that they were having a wedding. Garius looked at the girl who sat down in front of him and did not understand what was happening. Karako clasped her hands in supplication and repeated her words once more, asking the young man to marry her. The young man tried to collect his thoughts and figure out if it was true what he thought. Putting his hand on the girl's shoulder, Garius clarified her name, which made the girl very happy, because the guy remembered her. Later, the young man decided to clarify whether Gizel came with Kuroko, but the girl replied that she came alone to see the hero. The girl admired the man in front of her, but their conversation was interrupted by Lily. The girl turned and looked at the girl and then asked who she was. The blonde-haired girl replied that she was the daughter of the chief of Ellenfil village, Liliania. Karaku realized that Lilia was one of those who traveled with the hero, so she thanked her for coming all the way to Rome. After a short conversation, the girl took a closer look at those who were next to her. After Kuroko looked at her interlocutors, she bowed low and began to apologize for her proposal, as she thought that Liliania was the legitimate wife of Garius. The blonde-haired girl became very nervous and embarrassed, denying what Kuroko had said. The girl looked at the young man, who was very calm, and asked if she was mistaken. Garius looked at the girl and replied that there really was no such relationship between him and Liliania, which was why the girl was upset. Because of the young man's words, the girl was delighted and again offered the guy to marry her. Due to Liliana's displeasure, Kuroko replied to the girl that she should not care about the girl's proposal, since she and Garius were not legally married. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Tellius entered the house, looking for Garius for some reason. He saw that Kuroko was also in the room. so he decided to go out and called the young man to follow him. Tellius began to whisper with his friend that he knew that Kuroku would come to him, so the guy needed to find out about the circumstances of the marriage. However, the young man did not understand what they wanted to hear from him. Tellius explained that Kuroku had long ago learned that Garius lived alone on the outskirts of the village, and he was also the only hero and, moreover, a human being. The young man offered to tell everyone in the city not to worry about him, but Tellius replied that it would not be so easy. Due to the fact that it will not be enough for residents to just say something, Tellius said that they need to consult with Giz. After the conversation was over, Tellius and Garius returned to the house, after which the creature invited everyone inside to live together for a while. Liliania became very nervous and trembled with embarrassment. The girl with blonde hair said that when a man and a woman start living together, they have children. Everyone was very surprised by what they heard. Kuroku was the only one who was happy with the new information for herself. While the girl was explaining something to the girl, Tellius told Garius that Liliania was only 13 years old. Elves matured quickly, so even Miguel was already 30. After such a shock, Tellius decided to leave the young man to talk to the girls himself. His friend also reminded the young man that he was very busy, and Garius already thought that he was just being played this way. In order not to stay at home, Garius decided to bring Kuroka and Liliania to a place where he spent a lot of time, since it was his job. Kuroku was happy and delighted to be brought to a new place. Liliania asked why the young man decided to show his work to the girl, but he replied that he just did not want to hide anything from her. Coming closer, the girl said that she also wanted to help the workers, so Garius decided that he would give the chicken something simple, but she said that she also wanted to pull fish, like the others. Garius was surprised at how easily the girl did the hard work, because the young man had heard that Kuroku was partly human and partly half-human. Liliania added that, according to rumors, the girl had more power than the entire dragon family. The young man thought that if Kuroku had been born 10 years earlier, she would have been an outstanding warrior, because even Alcinyard was dressed in holy armor. However, the young man rejected such thoughts because Kuroku called him and Liliania. The guy noted that this girl was very innocent and would never be able to kill someone, so they should accept her happiness. After finishing the fish extraction work, the company came to the goblin pasture. The couple thanked those who came to visit them and wished them well. A couple of goblins were making out in front of the guests, but the husband asked his wife to be a little calmer. Kuroku was happy with how the couple got along with each other. Next, Garius got to work and began shearing sheep. While the young man was doing the haircut, he thought that the goblins were newlyweds. He also noticed that Kuroku wanted something like this because it seemed that all the half-humans showed their love to others very vividly. Due to the fact that the young man was thinking hard, he did not notice how a girl crept up to him and jumped on him. Garius told the girl not to do it so unexpectedly, because he had a sharp and dangerous object in his hands. Liliania, who ran to the couple, also told Kuroku not to do this anymore. The girl asked why the girl did not clean the barn, to which the elf replied that she was cleaning, but when she saw the couple together, she decided to come. Kuroku also added that the newly married goblins advised her to make friends with everyone, but Liliania said that it was better for the girl to play with Ao and the herd because it was much more fun than with Garius. Despite the fact that half-humans expressed their love too vividly, Garius found it very sweet. After the young man finished his work, a couple of goblins took the wool and said that the young man could now rest. The young man followed the goblin's advice and went to rest. Later, Lilia came up to him and said that she had finished cleaning, so she would like to have lunch with Garius. The young man looked at Kuroka and Awo and asked the girl why she did not invite them to eat, to which the elf replied that they had not played enough yet. For a while, the couple enjoyed a snack and remained silent. Garius really liked the sandwiches he was eating, so he decided to ask if the girl had made them herself. However, Liliania replied that she had only packed them since she did not know how to cook yet. After another silence, Garius and Liliania decided to ask each other something, but because they did it at the same time, they interrupted themselves. After mutual apologies, the girl decided to say that she was jealous of the guy. Liliania added that she could do almost nothing that day because she did not quite understand how to do her job properly, and this worried her. The girl continued and noted that Garius could help anyone out, and she was only good at practicing attacking magic, which was why her brother Miguel was worried about her. The girl also asked the young man if he knew that every district in the city has its own representative who is sent to the Congress. The guy replied that he had heard something about such an event. Miguel was offered as a representative of the district. Garius said that he was the son of the village chief, so it was logical, but the girl replied that they had recently appeared. So Miguel said that he was too young and inexperienced. The guy looked at Lily and replied to her questioning look that Gizel had told him that people who had lost their homeland, which was the basis of all their connections, were beginning to believe in family ties. After this phrase, the guy immediately thought of elves. The young man added that if Miguel considered himself half a man, then Lily and Nia could become the other half, because Garius was sure that this was the girl's purpose, to support her brother. The blonde-haired girl was silent at first, considering the young man's words. But after a few moments she replied that he was right, so when she returned home, she would talk to her brother. Liliania looked at her interlocutor and smiled, thanking Harris for his support. She also added that she was very happy to consult with the guy. The young man looked at the girl and for a while could not take his eyes off her. But after she called him, Garius replied that he was glad to help. While Garius and Liliania were talking, Kuroku was playing with Ao. The girl threw a stick to the animal, and it ran quickly to catch her. After the young man finished the conversation, he went over to the girl to look after her. Kuroku was happy to play with Ao, so she noted that he was very obedient. The girl said that Ao's instincts were just fine. She also noted that he was growing very fast, which made it clear that he was an unusual wolf. Kuroku also decided to tell about the horn that grew at Ao. Garius asked what the girl was talking about, to which the girl replied that she did not think it was bad that Ao had a horn, but Kuroku wondered who the wolf reminded her of. However, due to the fact that the wolf began to lick the girl, she laughed and got distracted. At this time, two villagers approached the couple, apologizing for the wait. Turning around, the young man saw that Zipparu and Telios were standing in front of him. The young man guessed that the head of the city and everyone else would travel with him to meet the spirit of the beast. Sebaru laughed and said that he had already seen the spirit of the beast, so he would go along with Garius in order to greet him. The young man was glad, however, when he saw Kuroku's confused face. He asked her what had happened. It turned out that the girl was surprised that Sapporo came to them. The creature greeted Kuroko and praised her for looking good, then patted her on the head. The young man decided to ask what kind of animal spirit Zipparu had seen, but the orc replied that he did not know himself. Kuroku added that a spiritual beast rarely awakens its true form. Also, Ryunatea, who lives in their land, was very shy, so he just looked with glowing heads from the depths of his cave. Zipparu added that the spirit of the beast has an unusual way of talking, so he only heard its appearance in his head. The young man already wanted to set off, but Telius told him to put away his blade because the spirit of the beast is a complex personality, so having a weapon of special power will make him wary, since this will be his first meeting with the guy. The young man listened to the head of the city and put away his blade and asked Ao to keep an eye on him until he returned back. Also, Garius asked the wolf not to play with his weapon because he had already gone into trouble because of this. The animal was upset because its owner was saying goodbye to it. When the guy began to approach the door, Ao grabbed his pant leg and did not let go, so Garius sat down and stroked the wolf, saying that when he returned he would definitely play with him. While Garius, Telius, and Kuroku went on a short trip, Liliania was sitting at home and working with documents. But she was distracted by barking coming from the street. Going out into the courtyard, the girl saw that Ao was sitting at the porch of the building, barking loudly to attract attention to himself. Liliania immediately recognized the familiar wolf, and thought that he had come to play with her because he felt lonely, because there was no one next to him. However, as soon as the girl wanted to pet the animal, it abruptly turned towards the house. Elf realized that the wolf wanted her to follow him. Upon arriving at Garius's house, Ario pointed out to the girl the jug in which the guy's weapon was lying. Liliania took out a dagger and remembered that it was with the attribute of the wind. The girl thought that the spirit of the beast was exhausted, so everything should have been fine. But her thoughts were interrupted by the wolf, who resolutely wanted to go back outside. Ao did not wait for the elf and ran towards the forest, which Garius and his team went to. Later, Liliania realized that she could not resist and took the dagger, so she should not go into the forest. However, she thought that Garius could be in danger. The girl did not think long and went after Ao, who was already running into the forest because they both wanted to help Garius. Zepparu said that when the company passes through the forest, they will be able to enter the open space. Garius tried to dodge the branches that came in his way. The cave to which the comrades were walking was located in a large rock and was the place where the spirit of the beast Runetea lived. However, when Garius and Zepparu got closer, they were surprised to see the place they needed to get to. Looking around, Zepparu did not understand why the area looked so ruined and wondered what could have happened here. Telias also saw that the habitat of the Runetea was prone to destruction, but it did not affect a large area, so he himself had to be nearby. Garius understood that Telias was probably right, so he became wary and began to think about where Wuranacha might be. Karaku looked around and worried about the others. The creatures were also very careful and were looking for the inhabitant of the cave. Suddenly, Garius asked Zepparu to step back because he felt something approaching him from below. Zepparu did not have time to react to the man's words, so he could not move away when something really appeared out of the ground. A creature appeared in front of the team, which was clearly hostile to those who disturbed it. A huge grizzly appeared in front of his comrades, which Kuroku immediately shouted about. Zepparu, seeing an animal much taller than him in front of him, was also amazed. The girl shouted to her team to run away faster, because she saw that the grizzly was captured by an evil spirit. Zepparu, to whom the monster was closest, did not have time to dodge again, so the monster hit him. The creature flew away from the impact because the grizzly was very strong. When Garius saw this, he began to worry if everything was all right with his friend. Kuroku did not wait for the actions of the others and decided that she would be able to help those who were next to her. The blow to the enemy was also very strong, from which the grizzly could not even resist keeping his head in place. Kuroku wanted to help Zepparu, so she didn't think about defending herself. However, when the creature turned to the girl, it saw that the grizzly was already about to strike back. The girl did not expect that the monster would recover so quickly, so the grizzly's paw pinned her down. Telias immediately rushed to help Kurak, hitting the paw with his whole body. Telias picked up the girl in his arms, then threw her body at Garius, who was standing nearby to help the team defend themselves. The creature ordered the man to take responsibility for the girl and carry her away from danger. Telias also said that there was a barrier around the guy, so Garius should have time to escape. But the young man did not want to run away, because he did not understand what his friend was going to do. Garius shouted that he would also fight, but Telias interrupted him and said that the young man would not be able to cope with the beast without his wind dagger. Telias said that it did not know how long the protective barrier would last, so perhaps he and Zepparu would give their lives to protect people. However, the wounded Zepparu disagreed and added that they must survive today. Two creatures stood in front of the people to block the grizzly's path to them. Garius, holding Kuroka in his hands, understood that his comrades always valued others more than themselves. Memories came flooding back to Garius, in which he, along with Telias and Zepparu, rested, worked, and harvested. The guy knew how well his comrades treated him and wished him well, but Kuroku's hand pulled him out of his thoughts, which grabbed his t-shirt. The girl was injured, but still she was also very worried about Telias and Zepparu, and because of this, she could not hold back her tears. She blamed herself looking at the young man. After Garius saw the state Kuroku was in, as well as because of the words of his comrades, he no longer began to doubt. The guy was determined, so he began to come closer, saying that he himself was going to get rid of the monster that attacked them. The comrades did not expect such an action on the part of a person because they themselves understood the danger that overtook them. Telias, being annoyed and a little scared, turned around and looked at Garius, after which he again told him to leave with Kuroka. The grizzly did not wait any longer for the moment to attack and, growling loudly, decided that he would deal with the man first. However, the guy was faster than the monster and also had a small knife with him. Garius deftly slipped under the bear's paws to get to the other side and distract his opponent's attention by striking him. However, the blade hit something invisible, which caused the tip to be slightly cracked. The guy was confused. Once on the opposite side, the young man looked at his opponent, who was unharmed and most likely became more angry. Meeting eyes, the opponents simultaneously struck at each other, but the young man did not understand what kind of feeling he had experienced earlier. The young man assumed that something like a black mist had blocked his attack. Garius knew what to do in such a situation because there was always a workaround. When the grizzly attacked the man, he deflected his blow again. However, the next blow was made too fast, so the guy realized that his speed was inferior to that of a beast. The young man did not want to retreat, but he also realized that he would no longer be able to dodge, so he simply covered his face with his hands, but did not feel the blow. The bear tried to attack the young man, but something prevented him, after which the man shifted his gaze lower and was surprised. It turned out that Teleus and Zutto decided to help the brave Garius, who also decided to risk his life to save his friends and were able to catch the monster by the paws. The creatures quarreled with each other, but they had a common goal because the main thing was to help the young man in the fight with the monster. While Teleus and Zutto distracted the monster, Garius realized what he needed to do in order to eliminate the black fog that serves as the monster's armor. The young man decided to use the item Wizard to get rid of a common enemy. After Garius touched the animal, he immediately stabbed it with a knife, which he held in his other hand. The blow hit the target, and the bear was severely injured. The monster fell due to a strong blow, after which the young man immediately told Teleus to pull Zutto out of the barrier he hit. After Teleus heard Garius's words, he took his friend's arm to support him. Later, the creature told the man that he thought that the barrier was no longer on Zutto. But the young man had not yet had time to deal with it. A black sphere began to appear from the bear's body, so Teleus began to worry again and asked Garius what it was. The young man replied that what they were seeing was the real form of the evil spirit. The guy also explained that if you leave an evil spirit in a state, it can re-inhabit some animal, so the barrier will be able to contain the spirit for a while. However, the young man turned his head and realized that everything would be fine. The young man was smiling, so his companions looked behind him. It turned out that Liliania and Ao had already run to him. The girl, seeing the condition of her friends, immediately asked if they were all right. Garius stroked the wolf's head and realized that the animal had guessed to bring the girl and bring the blade because he asked not to touch it. The young man took the wind dagger from Lilia's hands, after which he went closer to the evil spirit. The young man swung his dagger, raising streams of wind as well as speeding up to gather as much strength as possible. After there were many streams of air, the young man directed them towards the black sphere, and a moment later it was destroyed, which meant that the evil spirit had been expelled. Garius exhaled, because he was able to save the entire team with the help of his comrades, after which a voice was heard nearby, addressing the hero and praising him. The team was approached by Ruinotel, the only ruler of the forest in which they found themselves. The creature said that it was creating a barrier to protect the guests, so its greeting was postponed, for which the animal apologized. After the ruler of the forest appeared, everyone began to notice that their wounds suddenly began to disappear. The team was surprised, and Kuroko was very happy. Garius raised his head to look at Reunite, after which he thanked him for his help. But the ruler of the forest said that he was the only one who should thank the hero, because while he was sleeping, an evil spirit got into his territory. The young man also decided to ask Reunati why such an evil spirit got here, to which the ruler of the forest replied that he looked like a natural disaster that he had to deal with. However, Reunate added that he was too careless, so he regrets what his guests had to overcome. The young man realized that the creature did not wish them harm, after which he was interrupted by Ao's barking. Upon seeing the wolf, the ruler of the forest said that his half looked very good. Upon hearing this, Garius thought that Ao was a child of Runetea. However, the creature hastened to explain that he created him to move into a new body. Ao was his reflection. Also, Runetea added that he was going to die in battle, leaving behind Ao. The plan was to transfer his soul into a wolf and wait for him to grow up. However, the connection was severed, so nothing would happen. The ruler of the forest also noted that, although Ao is a part of him, she has become very playful. After his words, the ruler of the forest said that his story was already over. However, even without checks, Reunitea was able to assess the abilities of Garius, who won the battle. The young man realized that the ruler of the forest had wanted to test him from the very beginning. Reunitea said that seeing the guy fight turned out to be much better than any test, and the creature also added that his entourage had long accepted him. After it was over, Garius and Zutto sat in the clearing and had a good time drinking delicious drinks. Zutto couldn't believe what had happened to them. Garius noted that he and Teleus acted recklessly because it was better for them to tell the guy about the check right away. However, Zutto replied that then the young man would not be too scared. After that, the guy asked about Kuroku, who was already asleep. The young man noted that the girl tried very hard to help them, and also he would like Telios to stay with them too, but Zutto said that he would hardly agree to stay with them. The guy wanted to clarify why Zutto thinks so, but his interlocutor had already decided to change the subject, asking the young man what he was going to do next. Garius looked at his reflection in the mug and smiled. The guy took a sip from his glass and decided to thank Zutto for the fact that the young man had been under his supervision for so long. The interlocutor was very surprised by the man's words and said that such behavior was not like him. The guy recalled that he was next to Lippy and Miguel. Everyone accepted him, even though he was a human being. He was not kicked out of town and sheltered, and Zutto helped take care of it. The young man's interlocutor said that everything was only due to the fact that Telios and Shizzle accepted his authority. However, the guy added that, even despite this, Zutto was kind to him from the very beginning, to which the creature replied that there was a reason for this. The young man wanted to know why Zutto behaved so towards him, so his interlocutor replied that he had a son, whom Garius looked very much like. He lived alone in a shabby store and diligently repaired it. Later, Zutto caught himself and asked if the young man was disgusted that he was being compared to an orc. Garius replied that he no longer thought about it, so he was not offended by something like that. Zutto summed up that it was because of this that he helped the guy. After a short pause, Zutto added that his words were partially false, because he was checking on the guy since he was a man who was a hero. The orc wanted to know if the young man really wanted to join someone like him or not. After listening to the interlocutor, the young man decided to ask him something. While Zutto was telling the story, he mentioned his son, but the guy noted that he talked about him as if everything was in the past. The orc closed his eyes and said it was true. His son was stubborn and honest. He was not deprived of physical strength and waved his axe all the time. Catching the tone of his interlocutor, Garius assumed that he would be told next. Zutto continued and said that his son once promised him, when everything was over, to go chop down trees in the farthest forest, an offer the orc recalled because his son laughed. After that, he found out about the hero of the people. The orc learned about the human hero and what happened when he was carelessly plowing a field. It seemed that his son was holding back the strongest man with his friends. When Garius heard this, he became very nervous. It was hard for Zutto to accept what had happened. He only thought about how much he hated everything. Such thoughts seized the orc's head when he heard that Shizzle had missed him. It was hard for Garius to breathe from what he was hearing. Zutto, remembering the past, could not contain his emotions and wondered why something like this happened to his son. Zutto calmed down a bit and added that if Garius hadn't apologized, he would have hit him. The orc also added that it might have been easier for him if the hero had turned out to be a bad person, but later said that only his death would calm him down. Putting his hand on the man's shoulder, Zutto thanked the man for being exactly what he is, because only because of this the orc was able to accept the death of his son. Even in spite of the past, Zutto felt that he was able to find the new son. Zutto looked calm, which made it seem that he was able to accept the loss. But Garius himself, after learning the tragic story of his mentor's son, could not contain his emotions and began to cry. The orc hugged his interlocutor, who was already screaming from the fact that he could not hold back tears, which is why Zutto himself did not notice how tears flowed from his eyes. The orc tried to stop the young man, telling him that men should not cry. Garius thought, remembering his past, that his tears had dried up forever. He felt like a terrible guy who was laughed at by everyone because of the way he was. The young man had completely forgotten what it was like to be vulnerable. The young man also understood that there would still be many who were against the hero, as well as some who would never be able to forgive him for the actions he had committed. However, Garius decided for himself that he would be devoted to those who did not turn away from him, not to people, but to half-people who know and accept him for who he is. The king was kneeling in front of a table on which lay a bloody head. The old man understood the situation he was in, so he knew that he could only bow. An adult man talked about giving the one who was now sitting next to him everything, the throne, and even the head of a false hero. Therefore, the old man asked the young man to spare his life. But the guy only listened and grinned at the pleas directed at him. The guy was in no hurry to say anything to the one who bowed his head in front of him. The old man was mocked even by those who surrounded the young man sitting on the throne. The dragon's wings were brightly illuminated by the sun, but the focused young man was serious and was not distracted by anything. Garius sat astride the dragon and controlled it, being dressed in more insulated clothes. The flight was completed, so the guy landed with the animal on one of the mountains. After a while, Lippy was enjoying the warmth, making tea, and said that he really liked the kotatsu he was sitting at. Later, Lippy decided to ask if Lilia would come to them today. Garius replied that she was a busy person, so she couldn't come every day. After that, the young man looked out the window and noted that time passes very quickly and it has been 3 years since they came to this place. Because of the guy's words, Lippy abruptly opened his eyes and looked at Garius, noting that it had really been a long time, so a person should have made a decision for a long time, which he had been postponing for so long. The young man was confused. However, Lippy immediately returned to her seat. As he felt cold, however, the young man began to feel tense. The animal added that the young man should have noticed Lily's feelings a long time ago because she clearly hinted that she liked the guy. Garius replied that he understood everything but was sure that the girl was still too young. Because of the young man's words, Lippy added that if the guy puts it off for a long time, then someone will take Lily away. But the young man said that he was ready for this. After Lippy added that he should pay more attention to the girl, barking was heard nearby. Lippy said that she had not seen Ao since the morning, after which Garius replied that he had returned even earlier than he expected. It turned out that Kuroku and Ao came together, which made the young man a little surprised. The girl smiled and greeted the guy, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. The young man confirmed that they really had not seen each other for a long time, so he invited Kuroka to enter the house. Later, the girl, like Lippy, began to drink tea to keep warm. After the girl had rested for a while, Garius said that if she came to him, then something had happened in the capital. Kuroka replied that she had already forgotten why she came. But after the young man's words, she remembered. Kuroka became very serious and looked at her interlocutor, after which she replied that Garius's homeland, the kingdom of Midorier, had fallen. After hearing this, Garius realized that he had no time to waste, so he immediately went to the dragon to set off. The young man knew that he couldn't just stay at home, so he flew in as fast as he could. After Garius arrived at the place, he thanked Kuro for his help and, patting him, added that he would only be back in 2 days. Flatus is the nearest fortified city near the demi-human land, although it was not as lively as the capital of the kingdom of Midorier itself. It was prosperous in the field of agriculture. Passing by the walls and thinking that he needed to gather more information about the kingdom, Garius heard how nearby people treated someone who was not like them badly. The girl who had a bow and arrow behind her back said that if the one they disliked died, then they would get nothing for it because they would just tell the slaver that he had escaped. The man standing next to me supported this idea. When Garius came up, he did not ask anything. He only asked if the one who is on Earth looks like that because of them. The company started laughing and insulting the person who came up. They thought that the young man wanted to take the captured slave for himself. After the young man dealt with the people, he helped the slave get up from the ground, handing him a potion, and again turned to the company with the question of who did something similar to the lizard. The team was defeated and trying to get back on its feet. One of the men replied that they had not beaten the slave, and after the young man asked who had done it, another member of the team replied that they had been attacked by monsters. Garius didn't believe in people's words, as they looked too good after the monster attack. Later, the man admitted that they used a slave to distract the monster, because in this way they were able to collect a lot of materials for sale. However, the guy did not care about the motives and goals of people. He understood the main thing. An innocent creature suffered because of them. The man tried to justify himself and said that such slaves were needed only for such purposes. Later, Garius had a question. The guy found out that in order to get into the city, he needed a pass, so the man from the team asked if Garius wanted to get into the city. The young man did not want to talk to the man, but replied that he really needed to get inside. After the team found out that Garius needed to get into the city, they offered him a deal according to which he would have to keep quiet and not tell anyone that they had killed a demon who was standing nearby. The man continued and said that if they return the slave back to the slaver, the lizard will tell that people used him in the fight against the monster, and because of this, they will have to pay a large fine than if they just say that he escaped. The young man listened to the offer that he received from the team and nodded to indicate that he understood everything. Because of such calmness on the part of the defender, the slave became very nervous. However, the fact that Garius nodded did not mean that he agreed with what he was told. The young man replied that people had made a mistake, and he was not an adventurer at all, but a bandit. The team did not understand what the young man meant because the bandits did not behave like the guy standing in front of them. However, Garius, after his words, began to approach the team, which had already prepared their weapons. The young man hastened to add and said that he was going to take away from people everything they had with them. The guy also noted that he would do exactly the same as they themselves, because he would take away their lives, which meant nothing to him. Garius began to draw his blade from its scabbard, which made the company of people tense up a lot. The young man also added that if they were ready to take someone else's life, then they had to be ready to part with their own. The young man waved his dagger and said that the lives of those who thought to control the fate of others were worthless. The group of people did not expect that the young man would seriously attack them, so they could not resist, but only shouted and asked someone for help. However, no one helped people. After some time, the dead bodies lay not far from the young man. Garius cut off the heads of his opponents. However, he did not feel bad about it. Due to the fact that the guy had been living peacefully for 3 whole years, he was worried that he would not be able to deal with his rivals in cold blood. However, the young man decided to say out loud that he did not have a single thought of pity for such people, so he did not hesitate to kill them all. After Garius finished with the whole team, he turned to the one he had saved and saw that the lizard was very scared because of what had happened. The slave was trembling with fear, but still decided to ask his savior about who he really is. Because of this question, Garius realized that he had said in vain recently that he was a bandit. In order not to frighten the creature even more, the young man replied that he was a human, which made the slave think that he was the same as other people. But the guy hurried to complete his answer. Garius came closer to the lizard and looked at it, after which he said that he was also a half-human. That is, a brother to creatures like him. The lizard could not believe what he had heard, and because of the surging feelings, tears flowed when Garius held out his hand to him, calming down a little. The lizard straightened up and looked at the young man in response, after which he squeezed his hand in a handshake. After a while, Garius waited for the creature he had saved, while he knelt in front of small mounds of earth, folded his arms, and closed his eyes. The young man did not understand why his new acquaintance, named Dolfio, treated the dead bodies of those who were going to kill him quite recently so well. The lizard turned to his new comrade and replied that, as much as he did not want to think that the dead got what they deserved, he understood that this was impossible since he had been taught to treat those who died with respect. Dolfio added that there were more than 1,000 of his brethren in Flatus who had been enslaved by a Luciola trader, so although the lizard was grateful to the young man, he could not escape alone. After which, Garius asked him to just wait. The lizard did not understand what the young man meant. At that time, Garius was already talking about how best to free so many of Dolfio's brothers because due to the number there was a problem with mobility since the way to Limores was not close. To the lizard's questioning look, the guy replied that he was thinking about how to free all the slaves from the power of the slaver, since for this it was necessary to first get into the city and find out some necessary information. Flipping a coin, Garius said that they would need to pay an entrance fee to get into the city and go exploring. Everything went as planned by the young man. Garius had previously taken a map from those with whom he had recently fought, after which he paid for the entrance of the guards and calmly walked with Dolfio into the territory of the city. There were many identical houses in the city which the comrades passed by. But after a while they stopped in front of a building that stood out a little from the rest. Because of his position, Dolfio had to stay at the exit, and Garius himself was able to go inside the building, after which he approached the girl at the counter and decided to ask her something. After some time, a representative of the Luciola company appeared in front of the young man, whose name was Mute. The man said that the receptionist had told him that the young man wanted to make a big deal with him. Garius replied that he wanted to hire all the demi-humans that were owned by Mute, so he needed to find out how much it would cost. The man was surprised by such a request from the young man. The man looked at the guy and said that he was a rather arrogant wanderer, but he would not be able to lend a single slave to someone he knew nothing about. The young man realized that the slaver was evaluating him. Garius realized what he needed to do, so he began to bluff and said that he was in a hurry, since he had arrived from the south and there were many more people with him. When he heard what the young man said about the south, he realized that the guy had to cross the river to get here. After the slaver asked if the young man from the Balandar Empire had come, Garius recalled his recent conversation with Kuroko when she asked if the guy knew anything about this empire. The girl told that one of the southern unions, the Principality of Grisatelia, was destroyed by their vassals. Balanchard seized alliances one by one and later proclaimed himself a powerful empire. Lippi added that the kingdom of Midiaria was also attacked by the empire, so it was logical to assume that a single-minded emperor was at the head. However, Garius added that he did not know the ruler's motives, but he could relatively understand him. Kuroko also said that there was no information regarding the emperor's gift. The young man could not believe that no one could find out anything. But after looking at the girl, he realized that this was indeed the case. Garius replied that it was important for them to find out what they were going to do now that they had become an entire empire, and then they would need to study the emperor himself. The girl apologized for talking about this topic, but the young man did not mind. The young man understood that he was the most suitable person to find out the necessary information. Returning to the conversation with Moit, Garius asked him if he would have any problems if the empire decided to attack them. The man became nervous and said that no one would ask them before the attack, so his product would be dragged into the battle, which would cause the business to suffer losses. After that, the slaver said that if not in the war, then the slaves would be busy in the fields. Mute added that the city is largely based on agriculture. In addition to farmers, there were also large landowners in the city who hire slaves. Slaves also wear shackles during work to avoid unpleasant accidents. The main thing that Garius understood was that during such periods of time as the man was talking about, all slaves worked outside the city walls, which meant that there might be an opportunity to save them. The slaver added that if the requests were not met, the nobles and the people running the parliament would take action. The man did not want to lose his business, so he was very worried about his product. The young man decided to clarify whether the slaver really values the demons he enslaved so much, to which the man replied that he would have problems if they died. Muade also added that slaves are a precious business tool. Garius clarified whether slaves were only a product for sale to him. The man was surprised and replied that demons were only needed for this, to which the young man agreed with him. However, the young man did not agree with the words of the interlocutor. He only added that it was natural for people to think in this way. The guy was thinking that it would be very good to use people in order to implement his rescue plan. After the young man asked if the man would be affected in any way if all the higher authorities of the city were replaced, Muad replied that if the situation did not get worse, he would only be glad to replace the upper strata. The guy said that his boss was generous to the business of the townspeople, so he would not interfere in such matters. The young man also added that he hopes for a good relationship with Moet, to which the man readily agreed. After the conversation, Garius went outside and walked in the opposite direction from the slavers' building to explore the area. After a while, a dog came out to meet the young man, who looked as if someone had treated him badly too. The guy took out a piece of food and handed it to the stray animal. Garius understood that there were many obstacles on the way to Utopia for thousands of demi-humans, but if they could live in Limerest, then the day would come for Dolfio and his brethren when they could smile happily just like Lippi and Lily. Looking at the dog, the young man once again realized that there was nothing for him that he could not do, so he would do anything for the benefit of others. Garius felt that someone was standing behind him, so he turned to the man who came up and said that he would be glad if his future interlocutor turned out to be the one he was looking for. At first, the man was silent, however, when Garius turned around. The young man with blonde hair also decided to come around the corner to meet the hero. After the burden turned out to be in front of the man, he decided to raise his voice anyway, and, as it turned out, the guy knew the name of Garius. A young man with a scar on his face and hiding behind a cloak so that he would not be recognized, greeted Garius and added that he had been waiting for his arrival. After some time, the young man went into one of the buildings, to which he invited his companion to follow him. The furnishings in the house were simple enough. Upon entering, the boy immediately wrote something down at a small bedside table standing at the entrance. When Garius entered the room, he looked around slightly to assess the situation, but the young man decided to attract his attention to talk. The guy with blonde hair decided to repeat that his name was Manus. The young man also reminded that his race is an elf. However, after the boy took off his hood, Garius's eyes widened in surprise and shock. Manus removed the strands to show his new comrade what had happened to his ears. It was clear from the guy's appearance that he had already come to terms with what had happened to him. So when he saw the man's reaction, he decided to tell him why his ears looked so unusual. The elf explained that there had once been false rumors that elf ears could be used as materials for magical potions, so something similar was done to him. But thanks to this, Manhus was able to conduct his business in human cities for a long time. After a short conversation, the young man said that they no longer need to be distracted and should quickly get to the business for which they had gathered. However, before starting, Garius decided to talk about what he had been doing before they met. The man talked about how he met a group of adventurers and later saw a slave trader. Manhus was surprised at how quickly Garius managed to gather information, meeting various people along the way. The man also noted that according to the information provided by the elf, it can be assumed that half-humans are oppressed in other cities. Therefore, even if Garius releases prisoners in one place, then security measures may be tightened in others. On the other hand, Garius understood that slaves were treated as commodities so they would not be disposed of just like that. It was because of this that the young man decided for himself that he needed to save those whom he could at the moment. Manhus was pouring tea, but after he saw that his interlocutor had become very intimidating, he asked what he was thinking. Garius immediately relented and replied that he was thinking about how he could rescue the captured demi-humans and help them escape. The elf was so surprised by the man's determination that he was distracted from his task for a few seconds and only later saw that he was spilling tea over the edge of the cup. Catching himself, Manhus apologized and said that he would immediately clean and wipe everything. The young man found a rag and began to wipe the floor to remove what he had spilled. Manhus also thought about what Garius answered him, because to have such a goal to save everyone seemed unrealistic to the guy, because there were a lot of prisoners. Garius himself understood the scale of his actions. However, he said that he had some kind of plan, but in order for it to work, he needed to contact the city spies to negotiate with them for help. Therefore, the man turned to the elf. Manhus, hearing the young man's request, did not hesitate to answer, because the man wanted to help save all those who were captured by people. The elf was crying because he couldn't believe that such a day would ever come. After some time, when he was already at home, Garius talked with his comrades about how to save thousands of half-humans in Flatus. Sitting at the meeting, those present noted how reckless the man was. The creatures gathered together supported the idea of Garius because he wanted to help the poor prisoners. But there were some nuances in his idea. One of the assembly members said that if they released the prisoners in Flatus, it could bring trouble to those in other cities. Garius replied that he understood such concerns, but he was determined for the best outcome of their joint actions. The young man also added that, no matter how rude it may sound, people treated half-humans as a commodity, so it is unlikely that they will be avenged for the kidnapping of several. This was especially true for slave owners. They would not harm what would need to be sold. It was possible that difficulties might arise in the implementation of the plan, but there was every reason to believe that the demi-humans would not suffer in the process. The elderly participant noted that such a path is full of difficulties. The creature also added that in order to save thousands, it might be necessary to sacrifice a lot of those who would save, but the Demon King wanted them to try to do it because there were still chances. However, another problem was raised that all the prisoners would be taken to limb arrest. Everyone present understood that this would really be problematic. The young man said that he had found out that most of the slaves would be outside the walls due to doing agricultural work. That is why it will not be a problem to launch an assault there and free everyone. However, it might not have been difficult to launch an assault, but the members of the assembly were interested in what they would need to do next. So Garius decided to tell them the plan he had come up with. After listening to the young man, everyone present fell silent for a while and did not know what to answer them. However, the Demon King was amazed and told the guy that it was amazing, since it was obviously not easy to come up with something like this. The old man also noted that such a plan would solve the problem of supplies and they would not need to worry about the pursuers. Garius added that the problem remained how to get everything they needed before the harvest, which would begin in 2 weeks. Since everything had to be implemented in such a short time, the young man asked if they would be able to cope with everything. Everyone present began to discuss what they had heard, until one of the members of the assembly hit the table. The man looked at the young man and replied that such a question was not even worth asking, because if something had to be done, then the young man should simply order and everything would be done. The guy said that he could not order anyone, but the Demon King noted that the young man was also, to some extent, the leader of the mission. Zepperu added that he would involve all carpenters in the training, as orcs can do hard work. Not only the orcs, but also the ogres, elves, and everyone else were very excited and ready to work, because for the common good they all wanted to try to benefit. Garius looked at all his comrades and noted that he could always rely on them. After some time, Garius again found himself at the gate, at which he had recently encountered a team of adventurers and saved Dolfio. The young man was holding a bag of gold in his hands, which he then handed to Miyad. The young man said that he was not sure if there were exactly 500 gold coins in it. However, if there was extra money, then the man could just take it for himself. The man thanked the guy, after which Garius said that he had to go. Finally, the slaver said that all the demons he was taking were useless enough, and asked why the young man needed them. But the young man did not answer. Garius warned the man and told him not to ask unnecessary questions if he wanted to continue doing business in the city. Mew tensed and agreed with the interlocutor. The young man no longer wanted to waste time talking to the man and, smiling, finally said that he would go and pick up all the goods. After the cart with the young man began to move away, the man grinned and thought that in the bag that the guy gave him, there were clearly more than 500 gold coins, at least 600. The man also reflected that if you take into account the price for replacing slaves, then he would still be a winner in any case. However, the slaver's thoughts were interrupted by his subordinates, who notified the master of the problem. The guy who came up hurried to tell Mue that someone had broken into the company's treasury and stolen a bag containing about 600 coins. After these words, the man guessed that Garius had robbed him. The man ordered horses to be harnessed immediately to catch up with the thief and return his goods. However, the subordinate, nervous and pointing to the sky, added that the problem was that the demons had escaped. At the same time, dragons were flying in the sky, which were pointed out by the subordinate of the man from whom the slaves were stolen. It turned out that the dragons were carrying a large structure that housed all the demons that Garius had kidnapped. The man guarding the prisoners said that the slaves were very easy to control because none of them even tried to escape once, despite the fact that they were bigger and stronger. However, the drunkard did not expect that he was already being watched. While the guard was painting alcohol, he did not notice that he was about to be attacked, so the attacker was able to quickly strike, getting rid of the man. The wolf, who had neutralized the slave guard, began to signal and whistle so that his comrades would understand that he had completed the task. Later, a whistle from another creature was also heard from another place. The whistling had died down, so it was clear that the cleanup team had completed its mission. Then, according to the plan, other creatures who were already ready to go had to act. The lizards acted quickly, so after freeing the prisoners from their shackles, they immediately told them to follow them. The slaves did not understand what was happening and asked where they were being taken. The lizard replied that all the prisoners would be taken to Utopia, that is, paradise for them. The prisoners did not attach much importance to the place where they were being led, but they said that with one carriage the rescuers would not be able to save them, because the guards would quickly catch up with them. A few days ago, Garius specially went to the place where the wyverns lived to discuss his plan with them. The ancient dragon Fafnir was surprised that a man came to him because people did not often visit him. The dragon asked what the man wanted from the dragons, and even suggested that he had come to fight with him. The young man introduced himself and confirmed that he was really a man, and the girl who was standing next to him was the granddaughter of the head of the village of Limarest, and they came to ask for help. The dragon listened to Garius's request but did not express a desire to help. The young man understood that it would not be easy to convince the dragon, so he prepared barrels of drinks and a brush in advance to persuade the interlocutor. Fafnir drank the sake that the guests brought him and was happy about how delicious it was, after which Garius helped the dragon scratch his back with a mop. Later, the dragon said that he was accepting a donation from the guy and would fulfill his request, which he came with. The guy was happy and asked Fafnir for some wyverns for a while. When the prisoners realized that they would be rescued, they began to talk about the fact that they still had relatives and friends in different places. But the lizard replied that they did not have to worry, since they would all be rescued too. The prisoners began to thank their savior. However, the team member replied that there was nothing to thank him for, because it would be better for the slaves to be grateful to his leader, because he was the one who came up with the rescue plan. But the prisoners did not yet know who he was. The lizard added that their leader is Garius. He was a hero of people because of whom creatures suffered for a long time in the past, but now he was doing everything to make peace everywhere. He was elsewhere, fulfilling his role in the rescue plan. The young man thought that the number of demi-humans who had been taken away was less than he had expected, so everything was not going exactly as it should have been. The guy's thoughts were interrupted by the messenger, who said that the pursuers had already moved out of the city after them. A team member reported that there were dozens of their pursuers, so if they didn't do anything, they would soon be caught up. Garius understood that he needed to do something, so first he gave the control of the carriage to the goblin sitting behind. The young man asked the messenger which district's rescue had been postponed, to which she replied that it was the northern one. The young man knew that Miguel's elven group had deployed in the northern district, but he was glad that Lilia did not participate in this, even though it was a manifestation of personal feelings on the part of Garius. After the young man gave control of the transport to another, he jumped off the carriage and climbed onto the back of the dragon, followed by the messenger. The young man shouted that he was leaving the rest to the team while he flew into battle. At the same time, the battle was in full swing in the northern district. The elf squad was fighting with knights who were much better equipped. Miguel stopped for a while and began to think about what to do because the fight was dragging on. After a few minutes, the elf ordered all the groups to form up. Miguel did not want to endanger his team, so he tried not to risk his comrades, but his sister rushed past him. The girl pulled ahead and wanted to help the squad because she was quite successful in training, but her brother asked her not to go too far. The elf used her skills, but her opponent was also very strong, so he dodged and wanted to attack Liliania with a sword. There was the sound of metal hitting someone's weapon. It turned out that Lilia was not alone. The one who helped her arrived in time and was able to strike the knight. Due to the fact that the opponent did not expect this, he was immediately neutralized. The girl thanked Lippy for his help, after which the creature smiled and said that he was glad to help. After the attacker was no longer dangerous, Liliania prepared to fight on. Lippy was also determined to continue the battle. However, neither Liliania nor Lippy had time to do anything, as a squad of orcs and ogres ran past them armed with clubs. Lippy was surprised by the sudden support, and Lilia said they could go and help them. However, Miguel's hand fell on the girl's shoulder, who said that the task of their squad was to rescue prisoners, and the brother also asked his sister to listen to his orders. The young man reminded that he allowed his sister to participate in the mission only because she promised to obey. Because if something happened to her, then Garius would be very angry. The mission was important, so the squad should hurry up and return to the wyverns. However, the messenger who arrived informed that there was important news for the squad leader, as an army of people from Flatus was heading towards their squad and there were about 50 of them. Liliania, upon hearing this information, told her brother that the lights should be lit immediately, after which she jumped on a horse and drove away while Miguel shouted at her to stop because he understood that his sister wanted to be a bait and distract opponents. The girl quickly got to the right place and began to light lights everywhere using her power. After Lilia finished, she thought that now she could only hope that the enemy army would believe in the deception and come to her side. Hearing loud noises, Elf turned around and saw that her plan had worked. Liliania did not waste time and began to recite spells that caused an even stronger fire, after which the girl shouted that she wanted to burn everyone to the ground. A huge column of fire formed behind the blonde-haired girl, which she ignited more and more. The elf was intensely focused to create a powerful flow. After Liliania shouted another word, she directed the fire forward so that it would head towards the enemy unit. The elf's face was red from the heat, but nothing stopped her. The fire really hit the enemy, which caused a big explosion, and clouds of smoke flew everywhere. After the blast wave subsided a little, the girl took her hand away from her face, hoping that she could hit most of the enemies. However, to the elf's surprise, the entire squad was completely unharmed. Looking more closely, Liliania saw that the knights were protected by the blessing of a magical barrier. Due to the unsuccessful attack, the girl jumped on her horse to leave faster. However, the girl did not manage to do this, as shots flew in her direction, which hit the horse, which caused her to scream loudly. The arrows pierced the animal's head, which shocked the elf. The girl did not expect that an attack in her direction would be able to cut off her way back so accurately. The horse fell to the ground as it was immediately killed by enemy arrows, and Liliania could not understand how the knights could hit the animal's head accurately from such a long distance. And even in the dark, it was possible only with the help of a spell. The enemy squad quickly overtook the girl who had nowhere to run. The knights pointed their bows at the elf, preparing to attack. Liliana could not believe that such a thing could happen to her. She had already seen arrows flying in her direction, so she thought that she would die soon. But before she died, she managed to remember Garius. As if out of nowhere, a young man really appeared in front of the elf, whom the girl had time to think about. Liliana did not expect that she would be saved, so the appearance of Garius was like a miracle for her. Lily, not believing her eyes, called the young man by name, but he did not have time to be distracted, as the knights were approaching again. The guide just said that he would find out from her later how she got here. In order not to put the girl in danger, Garius took her with one hand and jumped up, saying that first they needed to deal with their opponents. When the guide jumped up, he was caught on the fly by a dragon, on which he reached the northern district. However, as soon as the pair flew forward, the girl said that someone from the enemy casters had made a barrier. Liliana also hastened to add that this barrier repelled even her strongest fire attack. However, the young man calmly replied that he was aware of the barrier. The young man replied that he had seen how it happened. But now it was no longer important, because he had prepared in advance for something like this. The knights did hold the barrier with a spell. However, it did not help them, as the young man was able to destroy it by destroying his enemies. Seeing what happened, Liliana asked in surprise why the wind sword was not reflected by the barrier, to which the young man replied that the knights themselves could not attack when it was active, so Garius attacked when they took it away for a while. Spinning his blade, the young man realized that he needed to get rid of the rest of the knights, so he flew through the enemy squad, hitting people with his dagger. When the knights were finished in the north, Garius and Lily flew away. Along the way, the young man asked a girl how things were with Miguel's team, to which the elf replied that it was hard for them, but soon reinforcements joined them. The girl was upset, so she tried to apologize to the guy, but he said she didn't need to do it. The young man noted that, thanks to Lilia, he managed to defeat a significant number of enemies. Flying up to the designated place, the young man decided to implement his new plan in order to organize a surprise attack on the enemy. Miguel, fighting on the ground, was surprised by the sudden attack from the air, as the knights' heads began to literally fall off. The young man directed the wind currents from his blade towards the ground to hit targets from the sky, after which the elf raised his head and saw that the sudden attack was made by Garius. However, the young man did not calculate his strength a little and used up too much of it, which made him feel very tired. Liliana had noticed the change in the guy's behavior and took control of the dragon herself, asking if everything was okay with the man. After landing, Miguel thanked Garius for saving him and also worried about what happened to the guy. But the young man replied that he was fine, so first of all, it was necessary to escort everyone to the ship and take care of the wounded. The elf suggested that the enemy might send more reinforcements, but the young man assured that he had killed about 100 soldiers while getting to the place, so it was not worth waiting for the knights in the near future. The siblings were surprised at how many people Garius was able to defeat. The hero could no longer tolerate fatigue, and before he passed out, he said that he needed to rest a little, so he asked the elves to take care of the rest. After some time, Garius began to wake up, and the first thing he saw after waking up were the faces of Lippy and Liliana. The girl and the guy's friend were glad that the young man had woken up. After Garius opened his eyes, Lilia said that while he was sleeping, he stroked Lippy, after which the young man immediately apologized for it. When the young man began to recover and sat down, looking around, he saw the rescued prisoners and asked if everything had gone as planned. Lippy and Liliana looked at each other, then turned from the young man and smiled, saying that they had succeeded and that everyone had been saved. Because of these words, Garius couldn't help but smile and said that he was very glad. However, the smile quickly faded from the young man's face as he began to think that there were still quite a few victims. Since only about 100 prisoners were saved, so many more people needed to be saved. One plan wouldn't work twice, so Garius was already starting to think about what they would need to do next. The guy didn't care what they told him, because he was ready to throw away all his moral principles for the sake of justice. Lilia's hands, which stretched his cheeks, brought the young man out of his thoughts. The girl looked at the guy and said that he was thinking about too complicated things again. Elf took her hands away from the hero's face and added that he had nothing to worry about right now, because at the moment he just needed to be happy. The young man was confused at first, but later smiled and said that the girl was right because so far he does not need to think much. The young man also decided to ask and asked why Libby and Liliania were with him, because they had promised to stay at home at all. The couple exchanged glances and became a little embarrassed. After a short pause, Garius's friends replied that they missed him very much, so they couldn't just wait for him and decided to be there. One day, Garius decided to go to the hot springs with other residents of the city. The mayor and Lippy were with him. However, the young man wondered why Lippy was in the men's bath. At the same time, the young man heard that other visitors were approaching them. The young man looked back and saw that Kuroku and Lilia were walking towards his small company, who asked the girl to be careful. The girl did not listen to the older one and, running away, jumped into the water. Liliania was very embarrassed after she saw that Garius and Shizzle were already at the hot spring. The head of the city laughed and said that he was not interested in individuals of another species, and the young man only sank deeper into the water and hoped that the old man would not involve him in the conversation. Kuroku had fun and swam with Lippy, splashing water in all directions, and Lily gradually got used to sitting next to someone of the other sex. The girl looked very beautiful, her figure was good, and her behavior was modest, so Garius stared at the elf. The mayor wanted to break the silence, so he said that lately this meeting with those whom he can trust is the best thing that has happened to him. After that, Shizzle turned to Garius and told him that they had reached an agreement at the council meeting. But neither the young man nor Liliania understood what was being discussed. Recalling the events after the rescue operation, the guy noted that although the mission was successful this time and only with the help of all residents, there were still a lot of prisoners in the cities. Because of the guy's words, everyone present began to discuss. Which city should we start from next? How to find the necessary information? How many places are still left to go around? And how many more people are left to save? The young man himself understood the seriousness of the situation because he shared the feelings of those who had been oppressed for many years. After thinking a little, the young man still decided to voice his thoughts and said that he had a plan. The guy said that they would be able to save everyone at the same time only when they declared war. Shizzle was wary because their opponent was an entire city that could simply defeat them with its numbers. Garius understood this and replied that they would not go on a direct attack. The gap in numbers was huge, about 1 in 10. The guy added that if they chose a frontal attack, they would definitely lose, so the young man said that he would explain what to do. After telling the essence of his plan, the young man received only silence in response. But this was not surprising, because such proposed actions were typical only for people. The guy also added that he needed time to think and prepare. Garius finally said that if someone disagreed with him, he would listen and not force them to participate. So he asked them to discuss the plan with everyone and finally decide what they would do in the end. Coming back to the present, the guy was surprised at how quickly everyone made a decision because the half-humans should have hated such a plan. The head of the city replied that at first they were surprised, since the plan is to take the city hostage. Shizzle said that no one would have thought of taking over Flatus, an agricultural town and the main source of food, to demand the liberation of slaves. Garius understood how it sounded, so he knew that only humans would go to such an insidious plan. The head of the city replied that in a normal situation, none of them would want to fight if it wasn't necessary. Shizzle also added that half-humans will never be recognized as equal if they just continue to put up with their situation. However, each of them agreed to Garius's plan only because no one wanted to leave their own kind to fend for themselves. Shizzle decided to change the subject a little and asked the young man if he had ever thought about what would happen after everything was over. The young man did not understand the question asked a little. The head of the city explained what he meant for the young man to become a representative of Limeresta. Everyone who heard such a question was shocked. The young man only repeated that he had already refused this position, which surprised Liliania very much. Lippy and Kuroku supported this idea, but the guy again said that he was just a man and could do nothing but use his tools, so he could not control Limerest. Shizzle decided to close this topic for a while and let the guy think more. But Garius understood that the old man would still insist on his own. Later, the young man noticed that the girl was wearing a hairpin that he had given her. Kuroku also noted that she also wore a gift from a young man, to which Lippy said that it suits her very well. The guy said that it was the girl who helped him choose souvenirs when she showed him the Limerest. The young man looked at the elf again and said that the purple hairpin was very suitable for her silver hair and generally suited the girl very well. Liliania was very pleased with such a compliment and said that she liked it very much too. The rest of the audience who were looking at the couple were touched by the situation. Shizzle noted that it was very good to be young, after which Garius was a little embarrassed and decided to return to the conversation. The young man noted that if they start a war, they will need to do much more than before in Flatus. The head of the city suggested that it was necessary to train the warriors, but the guy replied that it would take too much time. Garius suggested a better auction and said they should improve their equipment. Then he asked about the self-blade. As soon as the young man asked about the blade, an underwater hikikomori and a part-time kelpie spiritual beast, Ishike, appeared next to the company. No one expected to see a creature in a hot spring, so there was silence. The creature that appeared heard that Garius needed equipment for warriors, so it said it could provide them in return for a small favor. The beast looked very happy, asking for something. The young man asked what service Ishika was talking about, to which the spiritual beast replied that her request was a little embarrassing. After a short pause, the beast asked for help in eliminating her stalker, which caused confusion among the listeners. Ishike added that a person will understand everything when they see him, so Garius was very surprised when he saw the stalker of the spiritual beast, who sprayed him with water when he got out to see the one who came to him. When the guy introduced himself, it turned out that Leviathan already knew the young man, because he was a hero of people, convincing spiritual beast to follow his orders. The man did not agree with this characterization, but the creature still refused to help. The guy asked if Leviathan knew the Kelpie spirit beast, after which the creature immediately guessed that she had asked for help from a human. However, as it turned out, the spiritual beast was only trying to make Ishik work, and she avoided it. The creature explained that spiritual beasts gain intelligence and strength in order to protect their own lands. But Ishike has recently become a spiritual beast. The young man realized that this was why Leviathan was chasing her and offered the beast an idea. The young man said that if Ishike did not fulfill her duties, then the spiritual beast could simply replace her and protect more lands. The creature replied that it was really a good idea because it was tired of running after Ishike. After solving the problem, the young man asked the spiritual beast about the dark crystal at the bottom of the lake. Leviathan took it out and said he found it when he explored the depths. The guy was very surprised at how big he was. The spirit beast smiled and said that Garius could take it for himself as a reward for helping him figure out what to do next with the lazy Ishka. After the young man received the huge crystal, he brought it to the workshop so that he and the rest of the workers could forge new weapons. Garius tried very hard, and in the end, he managed to forge a new blade, which will greatly help them in carrying out their new plan. After the new dagger was made, the workers in the workshop were greatly inspired and began to create weapons further. The young man went home, as evening had come. When it was getting close to night, Zepparu and Garius gathered again in the clearing with drinks. The orc asked why the guy came to him if a very important day was coming soon. The man replied that he was just doing what he wanted. At first, the young man was silent, but after a pause he replied that he felt a great responsibility. Zepparu said it was natural, because the guy had an important task, so it would be strange not to be responsible. Garius thought for a while again, and added that he had shown everyone a great victory in Flatus and the intoxicating joy of defeating the enemy. Zepparu clarified what the guy meant, to which the young man replied that he knew that everyone should not lose their vigilance. But even so, people might think that since they won the first battle, they would win the second, but there was still a chance of defeat. After Zepparu laughed, he assured the man that they would not lose, because they know what defeat is, unlike the hero, and they also want freedom for their friends too much and will not back down because of this. The young man was pleased with this attitude. Garius knew that half-humans fought a lot for their freedom and the freedom of their friends. The guy also decided to correct his interlocutor and said that he had worthy defeats in his life. Zepparu was surprised because he did not think that the hero was losing. When the next day came, a beautiful landscape appeared to the eye, on which there was a spacious field. Lippi and Liliania were standing with Garius, who asked the young man what they were doing outside while the man was taking something out of the bag. The guy knew that the girls had decided to go on the next mission, to which his girlfriends replied that they couldn't just stay at home while the others were fighting. Garius added that he would not stop them, but would like to give them something. The man gave the salamander sword to Lily because she had a connection with the spirit of fire. The girl could use it effectively. And for Lippy, Garius prepared boots for runners and a healing sword made of feathers to help and support others. Lily thanked the young man, but reminded him that she was not very effective in close combat. However, the guy noted that this weapon would help her when using magic. Lippy wondered what her new sword was doing. The man said that the sword was made of Pegasus feathers tied to a branch of a 1,000-year-old tree, and on the hilt were Ishike's mane and a dark crystal, which made it look like a sylph dagger. Libby asked if she was sure she could take something so valuable. Garius replied that Lippy was good at controlling such things, and she also had a kinship with the attributes of water and air, so the sword would suit her perfectly. Lippy was so glad that she started running in circles next to the young man. After the girls thanked Garius for the new weapons, the guy thought again that he was not destined to be a representative of Limeresta. Looking at his girlfriends, the man reasoned that the one who runs the country should be a leader and devoted to everyone. He needs to make rational decisions in order to get maximum efficiency. The weapon that the guy gave to his girlfriends, he could have given to more experienced warriors. But he did not do this because of his own whim, because they would have to fight in a dangerous battle, and the young man did not want his friends to die in this war. Garius understood that he might be criticized for such a decision, but he knew that he would do everything in his power to free all the prisoners. With his decisions, the young man showed that, for now, he can be selfish, because he did not ask for anything in return. The guy knew that even if something happened to him, he would never give up on his plan. After some time, Garius went on a reconnaissance mission, flying on a dragon to the city, which he needs to explore again in order to most effectively think over a plan of action, in order to start a war and free all captured slaves. The first rays of dawn appear over the still sleeping city. The gate across the moat opens wide with a bang. Then there is a bang in the sky in front of the gate. The guard raises his head in disbelief at the sound. An arrow with a note attached to it falls on the bridge in front of him. There's no one else around but him. The guard continues to look around in disbelief, looking for the one who launched the arrow with the message but sees no one. He decides to go over and see what is written in the note attached to the arrow, so he stretches out his hand to the arrow. The guard slowly unfolds the sheet and begins to read, but then his eyes widen in shock. After a while, people in suits gather in a large hall with tiers, and one person sits in an armchair at the very top and looks through some documents. There is a hubbub in the hall. 4 people are talking. One says it's definitely a joke. The other replies that it's the work of disgruntled soldiers. They want to find out who is behind this. The guard saw a wyvern, but they think he confused it with a bird. On the topmost tier, the chairman of the Flatus, Margrave Jormwald, is carefully reading a document. He looks strict and cunning at the same time. A short sentence is written on a crumpled piece of paper, which says that they need to disarm and surrender the city to them. They have 2 hours to do this, otherwise they will burn their farms to the ground. The Margrave clutches the letter in a rage and addresses everyone in the hall with, "Hey." The men shudder in their seats and the room becomes quiet. 10. Jormwald asks them if they have forgotten that once demons were able to steal all their slaves. His eyes are full of malice. Dark intentions are splashing in them. The men do not know what to answer at first, but then the hall begins to burst with voices. Officials declare that they will not be able to take the whole city by setting up several ambushes. Some tend to believe that this is still a joke. The Margrave replies to them that of course these requirements are impossible nevertheless. He puts his hands together, and he says, won't they have enough time to attack the city? People in the hall tense up at his words and some even jump up on the spot. A broad man, a former baron of the kingdom of Constor, suggests that the demons just want to intimidate them. Most likely they are up to something. The Margrave praises him, saying that, as expected, he has excellent instincts. But the former baron turns his head, answering that his knowledge cannot be at the same level as Walt's. He does not look at his subordinate with a question. Margrave says he doesn't know what they are planning. However, they will want to capitalize on their confusion. That's why they have to stay calm and deal with them when they come. Officials support his decision. The former baron sits down with a bang, replying that everything will be as he says, and the Margrave does not stop there in his plans. He wants to prepare himself to capture these demons and turn them into slaves. The officials take up the idea of their leader, saying that they will order the soldiers not to kill them if possible, but to maim them and then let them make children to use those as leverage. One of the officials asks if they were able to fly last time. What should they do with this turn of events? Officials continue to bail the strategy. Meanwhile, the guards fly into the walls and are knocked out, and the hero lands next to them. Garius is wearing a hood covering his face. Other guards, looking at the injured comrades, are in no hurry to attack the uninvited guest. Garius tells them to drop their weapons and surrender if they disobey and continue to fight. He will act accordingly. Without waiting for their response, he disappears in front of them with one jerk, leaving the confused guards alone. But they quickly come to their senses and shout so that others will not let them leave. They begin to chase the hero. But before they can take even a couple of steps, their heads are cut off by half-humans with wings. The guards look up in shock and see a whole group of demons. The winged warriors tell them that if they drop their weapons, they will save the guards' lives. Their sharp teeth are ready to bite into the dissenters. However, winged demons add that they think faster because they don't have much time to think. The warriors look up excitedly. Meanwhile, there is a noise from the door next to the Margrave, who turns around wondering what it could be. He's full of suspicion. The next moment, the door flies out and a guard rushes past him along with the fragments of the door. He flies over the fence of the tier, falling straight into the hall. The Margrave's eyes widen in horror, and Garius stands in the doorway to the hall in a hood. The doors are lying in front of him. The hero tells no one to move, because from now on this place is under his control. In the hands of Garius, the blade of the sylphs. The Margrave does not understand what is happening. He understands that the rumors that the blade was stolen by demons are true. The hero continues to speak, stating that they are all his hostages now, and hostages are valued only alive, so they must do what they are told. One of the officials is trying to escape. The hero notices this maneuver, and with a wave of his hand cuts off the hand that the official put on the door handle. The official begins to scream in pain, and the hero repeats that they did not try to escape. He told them not to move. Garius repeats again that hostages are valued alive. But as long as they are alive, he doesn't care if they lose a limb or two. Everyone present is terrified. The hero slowly walks out to the center of the hall where the fallen guard lies. The Margrave is watching him from above. He reflects, looking at the hero's weapon, that they said, someone stole the sylph blade. At the hero's triumphant return ceremony, the one who attacked Prince Jared with it is the thief. And also in the reports it was indicated that Harold had a similar weapon. The appearance of the hero is so similar to a human one. Most likely his family interacted with people for many generations. Meanwhile, Garius says that it seems that not all of them are here. But it doesn't matter. Garius orders everyone to go downstairs. The Margrave gets up first. He puts his hand on the table, pushing back the chair, and then goes down the stairs to the hero. The former Baron stands behind him. They exchange glances as soon as the Margrave passes by, and the former Baron barely nods. They're up to something. Soon, all the officials are standing in a circle and looking at the hero with his back turned to them. The Margrave steps forward. He says he hasn't introduced himself yet, at which point Garius turns at the sound of the Margrave's voice. The latter, bowing slightly, says that his name is Jorm Walt. He is the chairman of this council. Then he asks who the hero will be. But he replies that Garius has no name for him. Let him call it what he wants. The chairman makes a sound of mockery and sarcastically says that some demon refuses to give his name. He grins and makes an evil face, saying that the hero is just a wild beast without any manners. The hero looks at him gloomily. The chairman smiles triumphantly. He has distracted the attention of the hero. In his mind, he tells Conster to attack him. The former Baron does not waste time and goes on the attack, rushing forward with his whole body. The chairman is confident that no one will stop his muscle grabbing. The chairman smiles even wider, expecting victory any minute. The hero turns to Conster and starts moving towards him. The hero jumps up when he is very close and cuts off the former Baron's arm, jumping back to a safe distance himself. Conster falls, fainting from the blood, and the chairman is horrified by what is happening at this moment. Everyone freezes, not believing what is happening. The Margrave falls to his knees, asking the hero what he is. The chairman's hopes were not fulfilled, and then with renewed vigor shouting at the hero, from whom the mask falls off. Who is he? He silently looks at the desperate man. The hero indifferently says to send a message to the city that now this city is invaded by demons. The people gathered in the square in front of the herald, who announces that the goal of the invaders is the liberation of half-humans in other cities. The child begins to cry from the tense atmosphere around. The mother tries to calm him down. The herald ends the speech by saying that they will leave the city as soon as their goal is achieved. Meanwhile, the half-human lizards are robbing the store with weapons. The owner stands in the middle of the half-empty store and is silent, trembling. His face expresses sadness and fear. Then he notices that the half-humans are wrapping swords in cloth and hanging some tags. He asks perplexedly what it is. The demon clarifies what he's talking about. The half-man points to the tag and replies that this is in order not to forget who it belongs to when they return them later. The shopkeeper cheers up and asks if they will return everything later. The half-man replies that, of course, you shouldn't worry. The man falls silent in surprise. Without saying a word, he watches the demons leave of their belongings on the cart. He scratches his cheek, thinking it was unexpected. In the end, the shopkeeper comes to terms with the situation, saying that all that remains is to wait. There is a demon king standing on the bridge in front of the entrance to the city. Soldiers in cloaks are standing in front of him. The question remains, what are they planning to do after the capture of Flatus? The carts are moving away in an even line. The hero approaches the king, looking at the retreating wagons. He says that means they are gone. He turns his head in surprise, replying that Garius has finally woken up. Garius replies that, as a coordinator, he cannot sleep, which is more important. It will take about 4 days for the messenger to get to the nearest city and spread the news. It will take about 2 weeks for the news to reach distant cities. The hero claims that it will take less than 10 days for the freed slaves to arrive at the gathering place. He begins to analyze the situation. The hero reflects, he thinks that this will increase their authority in this city. Because of this, it will be easier to negotiate. And also because of the departed soldiers, it will be easier to suppress the riots in the city. And it was also lucky that the people of the council had an internal conflict due to accumulated stress. They could not come to a common agreement. It's a pity Deputy Commander Wald was a very reasonable man. Thanks to him, the first part of their plan was successful. The next step will be, here the hero interrupts his thoughts and says that he is leaving tomorrow morning. The Demon King asks if he is really going to Graham alone. Garius says not to worry, he will not be caught. But the king cheerfully replies that he is not worried about this. He's afraid he'll overdo it if no one keeps him on a leash. The hero answers him in the same tone, whether he really cares about it so much. To increase the chances that the negotiations will be successful, act quickly and stoke panic is simply necessary. The hero mounts a dragon and rushes at full speed to another city. The outlines of the city of Graham are rapidly appearing on the horizon. Garius pulls the bowstring on the fly and shoots an arrow towards the guard at the city gate, who does not notice the impending danger. Approaching the city, the arrow abruptly began to burst into flames. Then a huge explosion sounded behind the guard. People in the city, seeing the smoke coming up in a thin trickle, shout questions to each other about what is happening and the answer about some kind of explosion. Meanwhile, the hero on the dragon sweeps past them deep into the city. Frightened people are screaming. Is it really a monster? On the hero's way, there is a square with a fountain. Without thinking twice, the hero shoots an arrow there and there. There is another explosion. A large crater turns out to be in place of the fountain, and the hero, meanwhile, rises into the sky again. The hero thinks that now everything depends on how low they rate the demi-humans. Garius looks at the mess that has been created. Meanwhile, people are taking notes out of the bag. One of the officials is overcome with anger. He hits the table with his fist, shouting that he said it was war. He calls on the people around to unite the forces of 10 cities, because then some 100 demons will be nothing against him. Hundreds of voices shout in unison with him. Others are also inflamed with feelings. They shout that if the hero and his friends want slaves, they will get them. They will get their bodies. The damned demons have made a huge hole in their city. A crumpled piece of paper with demands is unfolded by Congressman Grandma Zaire Audji. Under the cries of comrades that it is necessary to teach the guys a lesson, the congressman calmly reads the requirements. A bunch of simple demons take them for fools. Zaire calmly says that now, that's it. He walks past the disgruntled men. He asks the crowd to calm down. Zaire says that this letter says that if the hero's comrades notice their army, they will burn the city and farms to the ground. and the way they deal with wild demons, he concludes that they will do so. The congressman is asked if he thinks they need to agree to their terms. Aji replies that it is, and Zaire closes his eyes for a second. One of their officials in the hall says that their entire slave register is carefully written in this letter, so it will not work to deceive them either. Under the leadership of the congressman, the room becomes calmer. Everyone is waiting for his words. Nevertheless, Zaire slyly squints his eyes. He asks not to misunderstand his words. Smiling grimly, he tells them that he said they would agree to their terms, but he did not say that they would just let them go. The officials cheerfully shout that they have realized they will attack the hero and his army when they liberate Flatus. Another official says that anyway, last time they escaped with the help of flying dragons. The congressman replies that there is no need to worry. He is sure they will not use them this time. He continues to reflect that there was something interesting in the letter. It said to send slaves to the southeastern forest. It is expected that if they go there, there will be demons waiting for them to take the slaves. He is asked if this is the reason why they will not fly on dragons. Zaire replies that this is the case. If they wanted to take the dragons, they would have chosen a more level surface, such as the fields north of the city, as the meeting place. According to the letters they sent to other cities, they are going to gather all the slaves in one place. It would be much more efficient for them to pick up slaves near each city if they were on dragons. There must be a smart enough demon among them. If they want to gain an advantage in the darkness of the night to escape, flying in an open area will reveal their direction. If they really use dragons, they can gather gifted ones who can run faster than a horse and find out where their base is. And if they choose the land route, they won't be able to hide well and will move very slowly because of the thousands of slaves who won't be able to fight. They just need to split into several groups. Predict a path and defeat them. Zaire clenches his hand into a fist and concludes that if the forces of all 11 cities are combined, their strength will be incomparable. He orders the fastest horses to be sent to each city and told to release all slaves immediately. Graham is the capital. There, naturally, they will use their counterattack strategy. When the congressman finished his speech, words of praise rang out from all sides. Those present decide to show what they are capable of so that the demons no longer dare to step on them. Meanwhile, the hero has already reached back to the captured city. He says that he heard that the slaves were released in Graham. It's time for the last stage of their plan. The Demon King happily replies that it looks like the other cities have released all the slaves too. The hero notices that they decided everything faster than he expected. Which is good. He is glad that he focused on Zaire Oji, the most influential person in Graham. The demon rubs his chin thoughtfully, not understanding what made them accept their terms so quickly. So quickly. The hero replied that he thought he had read the letter the way he expected, namely that they would not use dragons. The hero sighs softly, reflecting that up to this point everything was according to plan, but the most difficult part will be to get everyone safely to the distant forest. The hero confidently looks ahead, concluding in his head that he will cope with everything that they have planned. And now, it's time to show your teeth. In the forest, inside which the sun's rays do not penetrate, there are screams that here they are. These are demons. The forest thicket meets people. The wolf raised his head, and the girl's uncertain voice was heard next to him. Her hands are shaking, and Kukuru herself says, stretching the vowels, that she is here. Lippy slaps Kukora on her tense back, telling her to take a deep breath. The baby is struggling, but obeys the order. Some time ago. The starry night sky, the silver moon merges into one with a dark semicircle. There are only mountains and silence around. Kukoro asks the hero what he thinks if she joins them in this battle. Garius is silent at first, slowly considering the answer. He then replies that he would not want to send a little girl like her to the battlefield. They admire the scattering of stars together. The hero adds that, nevertheless, he cannot deny that she would be a great support either. Kukoro answers confusedly, he doesn't think he can. She doesn't think she can kill anyone. The hero looks at her in silence. Kukoro is also silent for a while, not knowing how else to describe his condition. The hero decides to say that, under normal circumstances, he would be worried about her. But this time everything is different. Kukoro asks again what is different. The hero tells her that she will participate in the last part of their plan. She needs to attack the enemies, destroy the guards, and slow down their progress. It would be better if she didn't kill them, then they could gain an advantage in this battle. She asks how it is. Then the hero told her not to think about it too much. Just let her do what she sees fit, and the result will not take long. After a while, Kukuru shouts to the people that it is good, let them give their best. Having said that, she rushes at the knights in the forest with a pole at the ready. Sparing no one, she attacks people with clear punches over and over again. One of the knights shouts that they can't kill him, so you shouldn't be afraid of them. He holds his sword out. However, they are immediately bombarded with stones from the side. Knights don't take much damage from this attack, but they are caught off guard. Little goblins sitting in the bushes continuously throw stones at people. Their location is finally noticed by the knights. They shout that they are small, but they don't have time to finish. The knights are being fired at again, but this time with arrows. Elves sitting on the branches of trees sprinkle enemies with a rain of arrows. Litby sweeps over the warriors, causing people to panic a lot. However, the leader tries to calm them down, saying that they still have a numerical advantage, so no one should retreat. Lippy notices this maneuver and jumps onto a branch that is located above the fleeing warriors. She shouts that she will not let them attack. Lippy waves some kind of handkerchief and the knights begin to be blown away by a strong wind. They fall, but persistently shout to continue the offensive. Lippy lands behind Kokoro. Telling her that the time has come, she replies that it's okay. She asks Ao to fulfill her plans. The cub lifts its muzzle up and begins to howl. Hearing this signal, the half-humans freeze and wait for the order. Kokoro shouts at them to retreat. In the blink of an eye, all the half-humans scatter to the sides. The knights don't understand what's going on. They shout that they cannot leave just like that. Orders are given to catch up with the demons, not to let them leave. The leader of the knights is answered by his soldiers. They say that many of them are wounded. They look at their leader in confusion. He looks around his ranks. An experienced knight understands that if he leaves wounded soldiers unattended, then the rest will be worried that it will not help the case. He shouts at them to leave them in the back line, and the rest to fight. The leader complains about their pathetic appearance. He says that if they burden him, they'd better die and take a couple of monsters with them. Suddenly, the hero's voice is heard asking if the commander can show him an example of his words. The leader of the knights looks up sharply and in surprise. There, among the branches, Garius is circling in a whirlwind of wind. He points the sylph blade at the knight, saying that their hunting time is over, now they will hunt them. His eyes are blazing with anger. The leader shouts to his soldiers that they are waiting, let them kill the hero. A couple of warriors immediately rush into the attack, but they do not have time to run. As a cut on the leaves, the heads of the knights fly. Only their leader remains alive. He is horrified to think who he is, but the hero does not stop, killing more and more knights. The main warrior analyzes the hero, realizing that he cuts the support soldiers without a drop of hesitation. The forest is filled with corpses of people. He recalls that the group they fought with before, they had great coordination but almost no firepower. It's as if they intentionally wounded the soldiers so that here he can't stand it and, trembling with annoyance, utters aloud the words that they intentionally, even if they don't tell him. They intentionally injured the soldiers to lure up support and kill them, and now what happens if no one can command this chaos? The hero asks how long it will take the defeated troops to reorganize. The leader of the knights makes angry noises, and then he screams curses at the demon before he dies. Meanwhile, another group of knights in a long gorge is confronted by the former demon king and his demons. The former demon king apologizes, saying that they are also desperate, so it won't be easy for anyone. Then magic circles appear behind him. He does not hesitate to attack the knights with projectiles. His magic circles continue to attack while the survivors turn their horse around and ride away. The escaped knight realizes that things are bad. He does not stop swearing. Even the Dragnels are on their side. They have not established their base in a more open space. The knight does not understand why everything turned out this way. He reaches the next squad, they ask him which squad he is from, and he tries to attract their attention. He says that their main camp was attacked and destroyed, that monsters seem to be their leader. He is asked what is wrong with the commander, who replies that the command center was also attacked. He assumes that no one survived. He is asked why they did nothing against the attackers. He says that it looks like the enemy leader disguised himself as one of them and attacked the command post. He explains that when the commander was gone, everyone who was fighting at that time decided to retreat. Everyone scattered in different directions. He is told that this is impossible. How could this happen? But while they were discussing, the wind picked up. The knight saw something approaching them and caused him a strong shock. He lost his last confidence in victory. The hero on a dragon with a spear rushed at them. He could only open his mouth in silent horror. The knight wondered what kind of powerful being was leading the demons into battle. These were his last thoughts. The next moment he was impaled on a spear. He only managed to whisper the question of whether the Demon King was the hero in front of him. The former Demon King asked the hero how he is doing. Garius lands next to him, replying that everything is fine. He destroyed the command post and killed someone similar to their commander on the way to this place. The demon says that it is interesting how they will react to this. The hero replies that at least it should slow them down. Old Dragneel replies that everything is going so smoothly that it is almost frightening. Garius says that you should not lose your vigilance. He asks what status they have. The demon says that there are no problems so far, but since they are divided into small groups, it will be difficult to assess the situation in general. The hero replies that he understood. Garius explains that they are now on the most important part of the plan. Even the slightest mistake can harm the released. Dragneel answers on exhale, which means they need to make even more efforts to prevent this. What a misfortune that it is too early for them to relax. The hero says that they just need to try a little more. He will clean up the area, so that they will be safe. Old Dragneel tells him not to overexert himself too much. Garius replies that he is right. He needs to save his strength to arrange a lightning thing at the end. With these words, the hero takes off into the sky. Old Dragneel exhales softly, answering after him that he did not mean it, although here he pauses thoughtfully. About 1 week ago, last night the demons took a large amount of provisions with them and retreated from Plautus. Knight reports the latest news to Congressman Zaire Oji. He replies that apparently they really liberated the city after they released the slaves. He clarifies to the warrior who came that they, of course, followed them. The knight replies that it's all right. They entered the forest and moved north. Zawuri smiles contentedly. Everything is happening as he expected. Now it will be easy to kill them all before they team up with the rest. But now the congressman's hand is shaking. News has come that everything did not go as he expected. He shouts at the whole house what it is. He clutches the paper, thinking how the people he sent were instantly defeated because the numbers should be on his side. He wonders if they've split up into small groups, although no, they shouldn't have. And then he notices the report sheet to the side. He remembers the guy in the report and assumes that he is the root of all the problems. Sweat is running down Zaire's face. A creature that could be the king of demons. That's how he was presented in the report. What kind of nonsense is this? The hero does not like his new rank, which was given to him by the surviving soldiers. Meanwhile, the hero with flying demi-humans reaches a building near a wide river through which a huge bridge runs. The hero remembers that this is a large western river separating the kingdom of humans from demons. Last time he was the one who made a raft to cross to the other side. There are skirmishes going on the eastern side against the army of people. As expected, they put a good guard on the western part of the bridge. Garius pulls the bowstring and shoots at the back ones by the river. Immediately, there is an explosion. The building collapses quickly. People quickly run out of their burning house, saving their lives. The hero notices this. He breathes air into his lungs. He then loudly commands the groups of half-humans nearby to attack and occupy the ships. Instantly, the half-human birds follow his order. Meanwhile, the knight runs into the meeting room. He apologizes for invading the meeting room, but the demons attacked the western part of the bridge and stole several large ships. One of those present says that if they voluntarily leave by sea, then it is even in their favor. Another is sorry for their loss, but they cannot suffer even more damage. They are shouted at, how carefree they are. Congressman Zaire explains to them that if they don't fight back now, they will have to live under the yoke of the Empire and demons at the same time. He is determined to end them, along with their so-called Demon King. Meanwhile, the hero on the ship gives the order to the half-human bird to send the ships downstream. As soon as the ship is in the middle of the river, they have to move to another one and do the same. The demon himself finishes by saying that they need to go down to the land and go to the collection point. He clarifies whether it is true. The hero replies that it is true. They will be. Here, the hero does not finish, grinning at his idea. The congressman also makes his move, ordering the horse to be sent across the northern part of the bridge. Zeri continues, explaining that if they move across the earth with so many non-combatant slaves, they will be very slowed down. If they match the number of enemy soldiers with their army, then there will be no problem. The congressman ends up saying that's what they want them to think. His gaze is strained. He's trying to understand the strategy of the opposite side. At the same time, Garius responds to his warriors that they will understand that this is a mistake. He calculates the opponent's moves. Zaire concludes in his reasoning that this is what the purpose of these demons is. The hero also ends his conclusions by saying that as soon as they understand, they will think that. Here, both strategists answer the same thing. The demons will try to escape on the ships. Garius fully anticipates the congressman's thoughts. Zaire, as soon as he has finished his speech, orders the soldiers to comb the shores as quickly as possible. They'll need to dock somewhere to take the demons on board. At the same time, the hero flies off the ship on his dragon, rushing at full speed to another group of demons. Before his eyes, there is a view of Flatus, its southern part. Crowds of demons walk like a single snake between the trees. Old Dragneel asks the hero who lands next to him if people have taken the bait. Garius responds positively. He explains that the entire metropolitan army is heading for the river. They shouldn't worry about being found yet. Old Dragneel happily concludes that now they can leisurely go home with their freed brothers. Light footsteps are heard nearby. Kukuru throws herself into Garius's arms with all her might, relieved to say that she was very worried. He falls on his back. In front of him are his friends, Kukuru, Ao, Lippy, and Lilia. He asks them if everything is okay with everyone, to which Lippy cheerfully replies that there is not even a scratch. Lilia anxiously asks what about the hero, if he is okay. He says he needs to get some rest. A cozy smile blooms on the hero's face. Then old Dragneel remembers that the human soldiers were saying some strange things. The hero tells him that he does not need to take the enemy's words seriously, but he answers, clarifying whether the enemies do not know who the hero is. The old demon calmly tells the hero that they called Garius none other than the Demon King. 3 identical questions are being asked at the same time by Garius, Lilia, and Lippy. All 3 are perplexed. Garius exhales wearily, commenting on the situation in such a way that the man who refused to be a hero has now become a demon king. It's not even funny. The hero and the half-demons are sitting at a table after the successful liberation of slaves in Flatus, and discussing a plan to confront the city-state in the capital of Limerest. And in the middle of it all, a little day of rest. Kukuru approaches the hero with a comb in his hands and asks how about such a gift to Lippy. The hero tells her that a brush is a good choice. She said that she wants to get all the brushes she can. So Lippy herself said last time when she and the hero were in the store. Garius happily tells Kukor that he seems to have been right when he decided to take her to the store to pick out souvenirs. In response, she happily says that the hero can leave the choice to her. So they go shopping and choose souvenirs for friends, a large cup for Zapparu, and a large pen for Helios. And finally, a souvenir for Lily. Kukuru suggests looking for a present in this store. She points her finger at a nearby sign. The hero chuckles, saying that this is a jewelry store. Kukuru enthusiastically replies that it is. Thinking about Lily, the hero remembers that she has long, beautiful silver hair. The hero thinks to give her a hairpin, but then he stumbles. Garius admits that he has never chosen women's accessories and does not know which of these will suit her better. Kukora takes into account the problem of Garius. She invites the hero to try them on her hair. She ties her ponytail on the side. The hero notes her idea as useful. He smiles happily at the dedication of his assistant. The hero sincerely thanks Kukora. She happily walks next to the souvenirs in her hands, saying that they did it. The hero is also happy about this. Garius calls the baby to him, and then hangs a flower-shaped hairpin on her hair. Kukoro's eyes begin to shine. The hero asks her to accept this gift as a thank you for the tour and help in choosing souvenirs. Kukoro touches the hairpin, and then happily thanks Garius, saying that she really likes the gift. The hero watches the joyful expression on the baby's face, when suddenly he is drawn into the thought that, depending on the decision of the council, a war may begin. Garius decides that even if this happens, he will not allow the demi-humans to bear the burden of killing people. He'll get his hands dirty as many times as it takes, but until then he wants to cherish this fleeting time of peace leisurely strolling through the streets of the village with the demons important to him. The kingdom of Mitterir has fallen. This happened even before Garius went to the provinces. The knights are carrying weapons together. Fierce battles are going on in front of the city wall. Thin wisps of smoke are creeping up. The knights on the wall see something and point at it with their finger. Thunder rumbles and lightning flashes behind them. A huge shadow appears on the ground. The knight, bowing his head, quietly says that this is it. There is a rumble on the ground from the footsteps of a giant demon. Its size is larger than the walls. The knights shout that this is a monster that was held back by the Empire. He waves his hand and gives the order to prepare the ballista. The weapon is pushed forward, preparing to use it. The ballista's arrow is aimed at the dangerous giant, but then a quick shadow flashes behind his shoulder. A girl in light clothes pushes off from the monster's body and jumps high at the knights who are preparing an attack. She rushes screaming towards the gates of the city, swinging for a deafening blow, her eyes shining with an inhuman brilliance. With all her might, she crashes into the gate, causing it to crack. The knight gives the order to shoot them down. He himself pulls the bowstring. However, the girl only raises the club higher, ignoring the hail of arrows flying at her. She is protected from the attacks of the knights by a bully who comes up close. He puts a stone axe on his shoulder and the arrows cut into him. The main knight shouts to the soldiers to quickly charge the ballista again. Subordinates hurriedly carry out the order. But then a girl's voice comes from behind, telling them to look up. A creature similar to a griffin flies over the knights. When the warriors turn their heads, they see the silhouette of a girl with 2 long tails. The knight recognizes her. His eyes widen in horror. A girl with dark feathers on her head stands in front of him. He screams in horror that she has red eyes. The same one squints rapaciously in response. Without saying another word, the girl blows off the head of the knights. The smile does not leave her face. Blood gets on her face, so she licks it off with her tongue. Meanwhile, the girl with the club and the bully finally break a hole in the wall where the door was a second ago. The giant, named Zolt, thanks his partner Ojo for the hard work. She replies that this is not the end, because they have not yet opened the inner gate. Then they both hear some noise, and then they see a familiar face coming down from above. The girl with the feathers, tapping her heels, asks why they took so long. She walks up to the couple and arrogantly tells them that they are both useless. Seriously. The girl beams with self-satisfaction, but Ojo and Zolt just stare at her in silence, ignoring the attack. She goes up to the half-ogre girl and asks if she has nothing to answer. Ojo calmly thanks the hot-tempered girl for opening the inner gate, but adds that her name is Penley, and Meldon is worth remembering. Meldon's face contorts with anger. She makes a sound of not understanding, and then shouts at her not to be too self-confident, because she will never be like them, people. Meldon insults Penley. After these words, Meldon walks away, leaving the couple alone. They are confronted by the sight of dead soldiers with severed heads. Ojo says that they kill their own kind, after all. People are such sinful creatures. She asks Zolt if he doesn't think the same. The bully calls her softly. Penley calmly replies that she knows. As the daughter of the headman, she is obliged to serve her brothers who are still alive. Even if she becomes the Emperor's weapon, she must atone for the wrong decision. Zol reassuringly tells her that it wasn't her fault. They were just unlucky. A new wave of knights appears in front of them again. Ojo apologizes to Zolt. It caused him a lot of problems. But he good-naturedly replies that it is not worth apologizing again. They stand in a fighting position, throwing their weapons behind their backs. Zolt suggests that she get it over with quickly. Smoke is coming from the walls of the city on both sides. The cries of battle are no longer heard. Everything seems to freeze in a sad premonition. In the great castle in the throne room, knights are kneeling along the aisle. A man in a royal cloak walks between them. Then he turns abruptly back in front of the stairs, majestically waving his expensive cape. A young guy with an eye patch is surrounded by 2 companions, a girl with braids and a long-haired magician. A cart with a wooden box is rolled up to them. The knight on his knees says that he was waiting for His Majesty. Then he opens a wooden box. The guy starts to shine from what he sees. In front of their eyes is a sword and breastplate, polished to a shine. The guy asks if this is the sacred armor of Alazahard. His eye is shining with happiness. He confidently takes a painted sword with a stone in his hand, but then he notices something and slightly crouches forward. The guy shouts in shock what happened. Why, the sword is so heavy, he can't lift it. The magician behind replies that it looks like an effect at the moment it is touched. The guy thoughtfully asks, so he can't use the armor if he's not recognized by it. The magician replies that it is. The guy asks a magician named Roy what he thinks about this. Roy is silent thoughtfully, looking at the armor. Roy replies that the inside is empty. Meldon makes a face, asking that since no one wears them, then isn't it wonderful? The guy calms her down, standing up for Roy. He replies that he did not mean it. He kindly explains to her that spirits usually live in everything, but Roy says that there is no spirit inside the armor. Confused Meldon begins to understand what he meant. She blushes and says that she feels stupid, but the guy pats her on the head, replying that he likes her sweet side. Maldon wraps his red cheeks in his hands. She admires her leader, and the guy turns to Penley, asking that, if he is not mistaken, demons believe in spirits. Penley does not answer him, standing silently on the sidelines. He just grins, saying that she is so unfriendly. Maldon gives her a look of displeasure. The young emperor then returns to Roy, asking how they will solve this. Roy responds to something by saying that it's okay. The magician says that you need to try to seal the spirit and summon it by force. The guy understands his intentions and adds words that after he will need to convince the spirit, really, it's such a hassle. The emperor complains that it is still a problem that the prince announced to the public that he is a hero. Penley listens in silence. He is the first emperor of the Balathard Empire, Yurtis Balathard, and it is said that his gift is a look into the past. Penley recalls that when he forced King Edgar to kill Prince Jared, he said a few words. Bending down to the king's ear, he announced that it was good, because King Edgar's long-standing wish had come true. Penley tries to figure out why he said it so confidently, if his gift only allows him to look into the past. Here the truth comes to Penley. She assumes that perhaps the true gift is valid, but she does not have time to voice her assumptions, as Yurtis notices her gaze. He puts his finger to his face and makes a sound of silence, his gaze full of cruelty. A tear rolls down Penley's face and she shivers. After some time in the stable, Zolt makes a sound of surprise. Reading people's minds. Ojo replies that. So, he warned her to keep quiet? Ojo is sure of it, and that's not all. Maybe he can talk to non-contact spirits. Zolt clarifies whether this means that he knows their thoughts that the demi-humans have gone to the farthest paradise. Ojo replies that it probably is. 55. The bully realizes that this is bad. Then he notices a light on the side, and Zolt turns to look at him in surprise. He sees a beautiful spirit girl in front of him who is staring at him intently. Zolt looks back at her. She mentally starts a conversation with Zolt, posing as the holy spirit of the Elzenater armor. She is glad that she met him. She hopes he doesn't mind if she tells him the details, but right now she's in trouble, which is why there's only a form in front of the ogre, which she only shows to her contactor. Zolt is at first taken aback and silent, but then replies that if she has something to say, he listens. The spirit weaves her fingers together and replies that, in short, she wants him to steal her from the Empire. Zolt confusedly asks for details. The spirit awkwardly apologizes, admitting that maybe she doesn't look like that right now, but she's really going crazy. Before it is sealed and it falls into the hands of the Emperor, the spirit asks to deliver it to its true owner, the hero Garius. Zolt listens to her in silence. He apologizes quietly, saying that it might cause problems for Ojo and the villagers. He can't take that risk. The spirit responds with understanding. She apologizes, saying that she turned to him with an awkward request, but warns him. The spirit says that the true nature of a man named Yurtis is that he is obsessed with trampling on other people's happiness. Zolt seriously thinks about her words. Penley, who does not hear their conversation, asks a friend what happened, but Zolt doesn't hear her. He decides that he cannot ignore this, and Zolt apologizes to Ojo and the whole village. The next moment, a rumble is heard under the roof of the stable, and then it goes quiet. Ojo jumps up from the straw, not understanding what is happening. Penley calls a friend who was sitting in front of her a minute ago, but there is no one in his place. She says in shock not to tell her what. She does not finish. In front of the castle, the knights stare in amazement in one direction. Ojo also comes running, her eyes full of terror. In front of her, surrounded by knights, sits a petrified Zolt who presses something to his stomach with one hand. She asks why he is like this. But before she can finish, Yurtis's voice is heard behind her. Ojo shudders. The Emperor, together with Meldon in their dressing gowns, go out onto the square. He asks, looking at the bully, what happened. Roe replies that during the sealing ritual, Zolt of the Ord tribe broke through the barrier and took the sacred armor. After that, he petrified with it in his hand so that they could not get it. Yurtis says that he wonders who ordered him to do this. He turns his head to Penley. The magician replies that he acted like he was crazy, but also seemed to want to steal the armor. Yurtis concludes that, therefore, from the very beginning his goal was the armor. The Emperor grinned. Someone manipulated him. Perhaps it was the spirit of the armor. Or maybe a former hero. The Emperor slaps the magician on the shoulder and says that he leaves a mess on them. He looks at Roy with cruel eyes and clearly tells him to remember, not a word to anyone. Roy responds with submissive agreement. Yurtis leaves Ojo behind, looking at Zolt forlornly. The Emperor says he's intrigued that it could be the former hero, Garius. Miles away, Garius stands on a hilly field watching the wind sway the grass. Suddenly, Zeperu starts calling him. The hero turns at the sound of his voice. He stands and waves at Garius. Zeperu tells the hero that he is working fast, but he still can't use it properly. He shows the hero a grass clipper. Garius tells him that it's a little difficult, but he doesn't have to rely on strength alone. He replies that he is going home and leaves the rest to the hero. He replies that no problem, good job. The hero thinks for a moment. They have successfully saved many of their brothers, but they still have a lot of work to do, such as allocating new staff and increasing productivity. The hero remembers another moment. These thoughts reminded him that he had not seen the Holy Spirit for a long time. An exclamation interrupts his thoughts. Lily appears in front of the hero, telling him welcome home. He looks at her in surprise. Lilia cheerfully talks about what she has been doing lately. Lilia says that Garius had a lot of laundry, so she helped wash it. Also, since the hero has been busy lately, she did the housework so that he could rest more. Lilia turns her head in his direction and gently asks if the hero is hungry, if he wants her to cook dinner. She calls him sweetly several times. Garius, he is so worried and blushes, not understanding why Lily suddenly became so caring. The hero asks if she's been doing so much housework lately. Is she training to be a good bride or something like that? Lilia flinches at his question, awkwardly answering something unclear. She starts talking even more, saying that does he know that everyone is asking her to hurry up and find someone and get married because she is the daughter of the village headman. The hero replies that he sees and then falls silent. Lilia bites her thumb, wondering if it's too blatant, but she thinks the hero won't notice if she does so much. Garius, looking at her, does not understand anything. Lilia seriously convinces herself that she will make Garius think that she can be a good wife, no matter how. Time flies fast when Garius returns after examining Flatus. They had once discussed Garius with Lippy. Lippy said she was glad that Garius had returned safely. Lilia replied, "It's good that nothing happened to the women." Lippy said it was a golden chance. Lilia asked again. Lippy looked at her grimly. She furiously told Lilia that if she continued to do nothing, she would not make progress. Who knows how many girls want to marry him? People aren't her only rivals, 22. She intimidated Lily with words that it would be too late if someone else took him away. She urgently needed to comprehend love with her own hands. Lippy calls the heroine to action. Then Lilia caught fire with this thought and replied that Lippy was right. She would do everything in her power. Lippy wishes her luck. The heroine convinces herself that she must show that she is a competent woman, so she needs to visit him more often. As a result, she is now very serious about moving in with the hero. Garius complains in his mind that he was just joking, but sees that she is really training to become a good bride. The hero reflects on the fact that elves are a gentle and kind race. No matter who she marries, he will continue to treat her well. The hero sighs softly in his thoughts. He remembers their joint events. The hero believes that she hated him when they first met. However, after going through a difficult path together, they managed to build a trusting relationship. The hero believes that she is a girl with a strong will, and here he stumbles. He is sure that there is a person who deserves her more than a hero. But even so, he is attracted to the fact that she has always been straightforward and pure. He calls her by name. Garius says that the food was very tasty. A wide smile blooms on Lily's face. She thanks the hero for the high assessment. The hero gathers his strength and says that, if possible, he wants to eat such food every day. Lily is surprised by his words, so she freezes for a moment. The hero's heart is pounding furiously, waiting for her answer. The girl's ears and face are covered with blush. A sweet atmosphere of romance reigns near them. But then the heroine just smiles broadly and replies that, of course, the hero can leave it to her. The atmosphere of softness is disintegrating. She suggests to the hero, how about Lilia will cook him breakfast, lunch, and dinner starting from that day? The hero stupidly asks again, how about that? The heroine continues. She elaborately explains to the hero that if she does this, it will be difficult for her to visit him every day, which is why she thinks about moving in with him if he doesn't mind. Then it seems to her that she is interfering with her newlywed brother. Garius exhales and replies that he doesn't mind. In his mind, he adds that they are beating around the bush. Lily just smiles happily. The hero, looking at her like this, answers himself that, in general, everything is fine now. Lilia sums it up by saying that from tomorrow they will live together. It is decided. Garius agrees. The next day, Gizel laughs out loud, and the hero notes that he is laughing too. Old Dragneel apologizes. When Gilles calms down, he tells the hero not to hesitate to contact him if anything happens, because the demon knows a lot about marriages between different races. The hero remembers that Kukora's mother was a human being. Garius sincerely thanks the old man for the offer. Then Gilles changes the subject, remembering what he heard. Everything is going according to plan. The hero replies that the plan is about half-humans similar to humans who open inns and taverns in Graham. The hero grins. Gilles says the city-state hired a large number of investigators after the incident. The information they receive will be very important in the future. The demi-humans themselves promised that they would do everything in their power. Also, during the preparation of the plan, there were rumors about the Empire. The hero grins at the word Empire again. Gil goes on to say that they continuously expanded the territory after the attack on the capital. If it's so fast, then there's a really capable person among them. Guile sums up that this is not accurate, but it is said that King Edgar is cooperating with the Empire. Garius sighs, saying that he probably sold the country to save his own life. This king would definitely do that. The hero asks, saying that there is something more important, if they have found out anything about the holy armor. Gizel replies that no, nothing, but he thinks that if the capital has fallen, then they better hurry up and find it as soon as possible. The hero agrees. He remembers the holy spirit of the armor, hoping that nothing happened to her. There is a knock on the door, and Kukoru enters the room, asking Garius if he would like to have lunch with her. Here Kukoru notices that the hero brought a basket with breakfast with him. This is a rarity. The hero confusedly replies that this is just in case. But Kukoru was already looking inside, asking what's inside. Gizel also moves closer. When they take off the tablecloth, there are sandwiches inside with a heart-shaped sauce on top. Stars light up in the girl's eyes. The hero looks confused, and Gizel is rather surprised. An excited Kukoru asks who cooked this lunchbox. She looks delighted, and Jill just says that he thinks they can be congratulated. After a while, someone hits the table with a mug with alcohol inside. A loud voice is heard saying that he panicked for a moment. Lilia's brother is sitting at the table and crying, saying that when his parents left, he was worried he didn't know how. He says he knows she can sometimes be aggressive, but at heart, she is a kind girl. The hero understands. He says it for the third time. Then a woman's voice is heard behind the drunk man, who says that he is bothering Garius. Miguel turns at the sound of her voice. He recognizes his pregnant wife and worriedly says that he asked her to rest inside. But Flo replies that she is as fine as possible. The hero asks sympathetically if the morning sickness has subsided. Flo replies that yes, Miguel treated her with extreme care. He excitedly replies that, of course, because children are the treasures of their race. No, this is the greatest treasure. He swears that Lilia will have their full support when she gets pregnant. Garius confusedly replies that Miguel is in a hurry. It's still a long way off. He just smiles. Miguel says that the hero knows that everyone is bothering him. He also wishes them happiness. The hero is impressed by his support. so he opens his mouth a little in surprise. Miguel and his wife, smiling tenderly, ask him to take care of Lily. This is the end of the conversation. The hero returns home. He announces his presence by walking in the door, but notices something on the threshold. Lily is rolling back and forth on the bed, buried in a pillow, screaming something. The hero asks what happened to her. She jumps up abruptly. Surprised by his unexpected return, she shouts that welcome home. She loudly tells the hero that she finished moving her things and was sitting in thought, and then she felt as she had done something crazy. The hero only replies that she knows everything that way. He smiles sweetly, looking affectionately at Lily. Then he kneels in front of the bed and asks the girl if she will marry him. Lilia quickly agrees. Then the meaning of the question asked by Garius comes to her. She jumps up, either asks or claims that yes. The hero continues affectionately, saying that there may be problematic moments due to the difference in races. However, he wants to always be with her. He asks her again if she agrees. Lilia calms down a little and now just sits blushing, and then answers that yes. If he is happy with her, she will gladly say yes to him. Tears of happiness come to Lily's eyes. She puts her hand in his. The hero laughs, saying that once, then let them not be embarrassed next to each other, but start behaving as usual again. Lilia agrees. She admits that she has done something uncharacteristic for herself. She puts her hand to her face in embarrassment. She supports the idea of being calm together. After that, they separate their hands and the hero asks if Lily has eaten. She replies that she has not. The hero says that he ate only a couple of pieces from Miguel, so he will cook something. Lily comes up to him and says that she will help him. The hero just thanks her. They cook dinner together. Then they go to bed together. Sitting in the same bed, the hero wishes Lily good night. She responds in kind. Ayo goes to sleep next to me. They turn off the lights. At first, Lily lies quietly on her side. Then Lily begins to blush and tremble, and then blushes completely and closes her eyes. Unable to stand the emotion, she screams loudly, still not believing what is happening. The hero is shocked and asks what happened. The center of the Graham State. A city with broken gates and ruined buildings, surrounded by a river. People on the streets are working to rebuild their city. They carry heavy bags, roll up logs, and work tirelessly. The Kukorn bar is located on one of these streets. A sign with a beer mug sways softly in the wind. It's quite lively inside. Waitresses are serving alcohol, people's voices are heard everywhere. Suddenly, the bell above the front door rings, announcing a new visitor. The bartender greets the newcomer. It turns out to be Garius disguised with glasses, a mustache, and a cape. He looks around the room suspiciously. In the corner on the bulletin board, he finds a piece of paper on which a demon with fangs, horns, and a pig's heel is painted. The sheet says that a new demon king has been born. The bartender draws the hero's attention to himself, asking if he wants anything. The hero turns in his direction. Garius replies that he wants an unusual dish to be brought, which is served only here, but without dessert. The bartender responds to him in time, that then he does not mind. If he chooses at his discretion, he is sure the hero will like it. The hero continues to exchange phrases with the bartender, saying that he is not gambling, but he likes this approach. The bartender hands out a note saying that if you like the dish, come again. The hero accepts some kind of card with a small card in the corner. An old man comes up to him and sits down next to him. He says that the stand is useless in his opinion. The old man asks why he needs it. The old man notices that they just want him to advertise them just like that. But the hero replies that he doesn't care as long as the food is delicious. Grandpa continues, saying that, honestly, he did not expect that he would be so confident with such a thing. He asks if he is a local hero. Maybe he is looking for a job. The hero agrees with his words. The old man does not calm down, comparing the hero's face with a snout. But then his thoughts are interrupted by the news that the Demon King has been found. He says it was mentioned that he has Ort blood in him. The hero looks at the chatterbox through his glasses, and then decides to keep up the conversation. The hero says that he was also surprised when the rumor reached. Did the Demon King look the same as in the photo? He looks at the other person, but the old man only says that he can't blame him. But it doesn't matter, because he would hardly have appeared in such a place. After the hero ate, he went outside and walked on, following the map obtained in the tavern. Finally, the hero arrives at his destination. It turns out to be a corner house with cracks and wide doors. The hero knocks on the door. Inside there is a man in a hood with a scar on his face. He turns at the sound. The man with the scar says that if they are after the money, he asks them to wait a little longer, but in response he hears words that it is Garius. The girl is surprised. She immediately opens the door, making a sound of protest. He asks the hero what he was thinking when he pronounced his name all over the street, but Garius calms the young girl down, saying that there is no one nearby and only he is in the building. The girl lets the guest into the house. At the same time, on the other side of the city, Whistle, there is a harbor near the main river. The carriages are slowly entering the city. Knights are walking along the main road, leading someone after them. People gather around. A short elderly man in rich clothes walks first, with his hands behind his back, followed by Ojo. People are whispering, calling the man a fat and shameless king, the worst in history, who sold their country. He hears their conversations. The hero is watching from behind. Earlier, he and the girl discussed what she had found out about the situation in the center of the state. The noise was caused by the appearance of a half-man. The government took priority to create a united nation, and when the Empire launched an attack, Prince Jared was killed and King Edgar was caught. The hero says that something doesn't add up. Is Jared really dead? The girl replies that they say he resisted. The hero cannot believe that he had the courage. Garius replies that it looks like a cover. She asks if the hero thinks they are hiding something, then it is clear why the king put so much effort into convincing the citizens. By the way, about Emperor Yurtis. The girl says that there is no information about his blessing. They say that he usually wears an eye patch, and his other eye is red. The hero thoughtfully repeats the words about the red eye. There is little information. The girl says that according to rumors, the kingdom is ruled by an empire, but the hero replies that it is too early to accept the rumor as the truth. There is also the enchanter Roy and the knight Meldon, who is the emperor's assistant. It seems that with his blessing, Meldon is able to limit the movements of his target. They used to have 2 ogres in the main squad, but only one remained. A half-breed woman, Penley's name. The dead orc's name was Zolt. The hero asks what happened to him. She answers him that he participated in the capture of the capital, but apparently disappeared at the same time. A strange, huge stone also appeared on the square. The hero asked again about the huge stone. The girl explained that he appeared after the attack of the Empire. The hero thoughtfully pulls that there is little information from ordinary residents. It seems that you need to talk to more reliable sources. So he needs King Edgar or a half-orc. So the hero found himself in the square, looking at the procession. The half-orc's Ojo noticed the hero, but did not react. Then the man behind her in the hood said something to her. She turned her head sharply in the direction of Garius. Their gazes collided. The hero visibly tensed. Ojo wrinkled her face as she looked at the hero. Garius doesn't take his calm gaze off her. Penley turns back to the speaker. She says something to the one in the hood, and then again glances at the hero at the end of the crowd, but there is no one there, it turns out. She silently looks at where the hero was recently and moves on. Night falls on the city. The stars slowly light up. Garius lands on the ground near the city wall. He turns towards the forest. Penley's half-orc slowly approaches him. She silently stops right in front of him. They look at each other. The hero asks a question, asking if she is dead. But she does not allow the dialogue to continue and attacks sharply, swinging a club. He calmly jumps away, pushing off from the wall. The blow falls on an empty place. Penley screams, calling the hero the former hero Garius. Her face is flushed with rage. She says, without finishing the attack, that he has become the leader of the demons, as well as their king, what he has in mind. She asks how they formed an alliance, how he won their hearts by making them worship him. The hero responds in his mind that, rather on the contrary, they won his heart so that he felt at home. The hero dodged Penley's attack again. She continues to bombard him with questions, asking how the Holy Armor signed a contract with him. The hero looks at a club that is passed a short distance from his face. The hero steps back a little and thinks that, apparently, they failed to sign a contract with Elsinard. Out loud, he suggests that they calm down and talk it over. He calmly says that he will not ask about anything. But an enraged Penley only shouts that only she can ask questions here. She demands an answer from him again, asking how he became the king of demons. The hero answers her in his mind that he does not know himself, he is an ordinary citizen. The hero glances to the side. In the window of the wall there is a hooded man with a lamp. He is watching their fight. The hero, shortening from the next attack, says that she was also being watched. The hero suggests that Ojo pretend that they are fighting and speak in whispers. But she just screams at him to get off and swings for a strong blow. She hits the space in front of her with all her might so that a column of dust and dirt rises around her. The hero remains completely unharmed. He jumps high and stands on the support with his foot. He then swings the sylph blade and sends a cutting attack forward. But Ojo easily dodges, tilting his head to the side. Then she realizes that the attack is not meant for her, but for the hooded creature behind her. He also understands this. However, the blow does not find its target. Meldon stands in front of the hooded man, blocking the attack. The man finally takes off his hood. The hero says that the Emperor himself came to look. Just think. Yurtis looks at him with one eye, the other, without a bandage, he keeps closed. Emperor Yurtis is saying something softly to Meldon. She pulls the hood off her cape, listening attentively to her master. Meldon uses her blessing, making the hero freeze in place. She rushes into battle. But the hero begins to be surrounded by the wind, and then he is completely absorbed by the vortex. The girls can't get close to him. The Emperor is forced to cover his face from the air currents, and then when the wind begins to subside, he takes his hand aside. His eye looks directly at the hero, and a smile shines on his face. Garius stares back. And then the hurricane takes him away into the starry sky, leaving two people and one half-human looking at him from below. Meldon stands with her head thrown high up. The next moment her face is distorted with anger, she screams, not believing that he has escaped. She waves her fist in the direction where he disappeared, furiously saying that she didn't even have time to do anything. But Yurtis, who came up, replies that she should leave him. He rubs her on the head, explaining that he only needed to learn something from him. Meldon, pouting resentfully, complains that she didn't even have time to have fun. Then he glances at Penley, saying that she's also doing great, and he didn't drag around in these rags for nothing. She does not even look at the Emperor and remains silent in response. He continues, saying that he hoped to hear the terms of the contract for the holy armor, but here he chooses his words, just not about the dream country of the half-people of Remarest. Yurtis announces to himself in his mind that his next goal will be something else, as a predatory grin slips across his face. Like the complete destruction of the entire distant forest. He's smiling eerily, about to destroy the hero's village. At the same time, the hero gets to the village. Someone asks him if the Emperor is reading his mind. The hero replies that these are rumors, but he is afraid that they are true. Gizel frowns, saying that this is a very serious blessing. The hero recalls the battle, saying that Penley behaved strangely. He did not have time to answer questions as they came in. She only gave him time to think about the answer, and the Emperor was quite able to read it. In the worst case, he can not only read minds, but also view the target's memories. Old Dragneel responds with genuine surprise bordering on fear. The hero says that he will need to take this into account next time. He then changes the subject, asking Jill if he knows about the magic of communication. He replies that of course he knows about it. He says that the highest level of magic is granted only to creatures with special blessings. He even tried to fix it, but it didn't work. The hero in the forest then did not hear anything while the girl was trying to contact him. The hero tells Gil that it doesn't work that way because everyone has a different level of magic. Gil hopefully asks if this means that there is another way to use it. The hero answers that there is. In fact, he has created and is already testing such a device for his own purposes. He also asked the werewolf mice to help him. That's how their conversation ends. It looks like the village is going through its last peaceful days. A couple of days later, somewhere in the thicket of the forest, 3 mice are sitting in a hollow and working on some kind of device. One of them says that the receiver is flickering. The device looks like a box with a shining ball resembling an atom between the arcs. The werewolf mouse with glasses says that to reduce the consumption of magic, the device uses only a combination of numbers and pauses between them. Another smaller mouse replies that just think. They will install these devices in cities to reduce distances. The mouse girl says how smart Garius is. Someone is shouting that they are in trouble. a mouse in suspender pants bursts into the workshop and shouts that they are in trouble. What to do? The mouse tells Arnold to calm down, asking if he peed in his pants again. He replies that he did, but that's not the point. Garius is in danger. He tells me that a human woman is following him. The mouse girl asks him again in shock. The mouse with glasses asks the person who ran in to calm down and explain the situation. He awkwardly replies that he needs to go to the toilet. He himself remembers what happened a couple of minutes ago. He was walking through the woods, thinking about what he needed to go to the toilet. Then he hears someone singing a song. The mouse immediately recognized the human voice, so he decided to see who it was. He went to the bank of the river and, hiding in the tall grass, saw a girl with braids. She was washing in the water and humming something to herself. Meldon washed, singing and dancing to the beat. The mouse shuddered in fright, realizing that this was indeed a human woman. He remembers that most likely Garius warned about her. Meanwhile, Meldon sings that she is a little lonely because she has not been able to stay with His Majesty yet, but she needs to put up with this. Resign yourself to tear the fat man to pieces. His face contorts into a terrible grimace, and the mouse screams in surprise. Meldon turns abruptly at the sound, asking who is there. She sees a mouse and says she doesn't even want to kill it, so Meldon decides that he will be her lunch. She holds out her hand to the mouse, whose eyes are crying. He shouts at her not to eat him, and runs away quickly. Meldon, in shock, screams that it is a talking mouse. The mouse with suspenders ends his story by saying that it was scary he is asked if there was only a girl there. The mouse remembers that there was a griffin next to her. She screamed for him to catch the mouse, but griffins are not the kind who will follow orders. The mouse with glasses thoughtfully polls that he is probably being controlled by some kind of magic. The mouse with suspenders loudly asks what they should do, because Garius needs to be warned about this immediately. The mouse girl excitedly asks how they will use the device, because it will not be possible to transfer much. While the two mice are panicking, the one with glasses starts fiddling with the communication device. He starts typing that there is an urgent report, the imposter has been found, the intruder is alone, and if she needs Garius, she will go east. The mice are screaming that Jason is a genius. Meanwhile, the hero opens the door to the hut. A raven is watching him, sitting on a branch. Garius feels something. The hero turns his head, gazing intently at the bird, and then enters the hut, from which his name is heard. Garius approaches the communication device. The demon bird next to him tells the hero that the communication system is working. The hero responds. He sees that he has received a message. He is glad that the device works without problems. Zepperu skeptically says that the hero looks too relaxed for the one they are following. The hero replies that it's good that only she came, because he can just trap her and beat her. Garius asks them to keep an eye on the device in case more messages arrive. The demon agrees, and Zepperu asks where the hero is going. The hero, on leaving, replies that even if Meldon came for him, it does not guarantee the safety of the village. She will go to the exit and fight with her. The hero replies with a determined expression that he will not let anyone get hurt. The hero sits on a dragon and soars into the sky. A raven flies next to him, who had been watching the hero before. The hero pays attention to this bird aside. She looks back at him in a human way. Garius sees that this crow with red eyes is an enemy scout, just as he thought. He decides to transmit his location data with her and lead Meldon to the exit of the village. So Garius does not chase the bird away,